Welcome to the Pro-Black Perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions. Your host tonight is the author of the Pro-Black Compendium and Zuberi and the Maroons of Ma'at, the Pan-African nationalist, Oni. Oni, what are we discussing tonight?
Hotep. Okay, this is chapter 4 of Consciencism, and it's going to be Consciencism. Check this out. All right, chapter 4 of Consciencism. So obviously, Kwame Nkrumah built up to this ideology, philosophy, that's going to be, as you see from the title, the philosophy and ideology for decolonization. I gotta admit, I thought he was going to go more into armed struggle in the last section, but even though he didn't, maybe he's going to go into it now. I do want to remind you that I'm a part of a podcasting network, so that you could also join the discussion on other channels, because there's a lot of discussion being had, there's a lot of discussion being had. So I definitely want you to look into the other stuff, whether it's the Harsh Reality podcast with Free Thinking, D. Webb and Elva Gell, or the Learning Curve with our revolutionary matron, or of course the Bitter Medicine podcast with Koku. I do want you to check those out.
This is D. Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Greetings, everyone. This is Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, inviting you to tune in to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the revolutionary matron, on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Pro-Black Perspective on KWAZ Radio.
All right, fam. So let's get into it. Consciencism. I hope you guys can hear me. If you can't hear me, that's going to suck, because this is going to be a long recording. And if you can't hear me, it's like, damn. I'm just going to double check that. Testing. Okay. I mean, it says that it's going to register. I don't know if it's going to be loud enough, but, it is what it is. Consciencism. Practice without thought is blind. Thought without practice is empty. Right? So usually we say theory and practice, but, he says practice and thought, and that's probably even more precise. Practice without thought is blind. Thought without practice is empty. The three segments of African society, which I specified in the last chapter, the traditional, the Western, the Islamic, coexist uneasily. The principles animating them are often in conflict with one another. I have an illustration trying to show how the principles which inform capitalism are in society with the socialist egalitarianism of the traditional African society, right? So now the question is, what is to be done then? I have stressed that the two other segments, in order to be rightly seen, must be accommodated only as experiences of the traditional African society. If we fail to do this, our society will be racked by the most malignant schizophrenia. This is actually pretty interesting. Again, it's interesting because when you go to Ghana, you realize, well, particularly the city, because I was in Accra, I didn't really go into the village, right? But when you're in the city, you realize that there's no schizophrenia. It's a Christian community. The traditional Africa that you would have loved to have seen is not there, okay? It's just not there. You see some people dressed up as Muslims, but you see, on Sunday, in fact, everything was closed down. I was like, I want to go eat some food, and it was like, yeah, right. There's no one's cooking because everybody's going to church. And if they weren't already, and the only people who were open were people who were going to church later. It was interesting because you wake up early there and you're just like, let me go and get me some bite, and it's like, nope. But anyway, so that's what it is. Our attitude to the Western, yeah. But again, I do like this first phrase. I really think you guys should write it down. Practice without thought is blind. And thought, because this really goes back to the whole idea of Nkrumah, just like the rest of us, are tired of the astutes. The astutes are the people who thought without practice. They think, they discuss, they so on and so forth, but there's no practice. And it's like, yeah, that's empty. In fact, I actually know people who would tell me, their thoughts on things. And I'd be like, yeah, where's your practice? And they're like, hey, look, I have to think first. I have to think about it first. And it's like, yeah, sure, but, one thing I noticed, and I can say this from my personal experience, is that I've engaged with people who've been thinking about going to Africa, let's say, or thinking about doing something, and they've been thinking about it for, the person I know particularly thought about it for a decade, I don't have to say that I haven't thought about it for a decade either, but I mean, all right, so I guess I'll just spill the beans. Realistically speaking, I was thinking about going with my son's mother, right? And she's been thinking about it, so on and so forth. And basically, the reason why I haven't gone is because, I just kept saying, let's coordinate. We never went together, obviously. But, again, she's never gone. But she's been thinking about it. And she's been looking for a way. And, to this day, she still doesn't have a passport. So, it's, I know, right? Snitching, right? But for real, though, it's thought without practice is empty. Realistically speaking, you want to have practice. And see, it's not to say that you have practice without thought. Of course not. So it's really the sum of practice and thought. But, people can often tell when you're serious. And, if you were to just interview, like I say, my son's mother, if you were to just interview her, you would think, if you're not wise to the game, you would think she was serious. But, like I said, it's a decade, and it just holds other people back. Or it held me back until I finally got it. I was like, damn, that's what I was missing. All right, let me stop. Okay, sorry. Our attitude to the Western and Islamic experience must be purposeful. It must also be guided by thought, for practice without thought is blind. What is called for as to the first step is a body of connected thought which will determine the general nature of our action in unifying the society which we have inherited. This unification to take account at all times of the elevated ideals underlying the traditional African society. Since social revolution must therefore have standing firmly behind it an intellectual revolution, a revolution in which our thinking and philosophy are directed towards the redemption of our society. Our philosophy must find its weapons in the environment and living conditions of the African people. It is from those conditions that the intellectual content of our philosophy must be created. The emancipation of the African continent is the emancipation of man. This requires two aims. First, the restitution of the egalitarianism of human society, and second, the logistic mobilization of all our resources toward the attainment of that restitution. All right, long story short, he's like, look, traditional Africa was egalitarian. There's other elements inside of our society, i.e. Christianity and Islam. Instead of extirpating Christianity and Islam, we're going to have to see how it could be melded into the traditional values of egalitarianism, and then we're going to utilize all of our resources towards making a new man, in a sense, or a new human being, right? No sexism, right? No, but seriously, a new human being that is toward this egalitarian spirit. And just to say that he's going to put resources behind this sort of attitude. Now, I do want to admit, as peaceful as Ghana was, I would admit that it doesn't seem like this thing came to fruition. And for those of you who saw Chapter 5, if you did, whatever, it looks like heavily mathematical philosophy over here, so it's not really too surprising that didn't happen. Although, he could have, this is a document that could have been translated and simplified for younger people to adapt into their own sort of mindset. But, that's we're living in a strange time. I'm gonna admit we're living in a strange time. This right here is so genius that it could be, it should be more widespread, but it's not, and it's really questionable as to why. Definitely, if you have a comment, if you want to let me know, just drop a comment in the description. In the comment section. Let me know, why do you think this is not widespread, right? Or how do you think this could become widespread? Because this is really, it could be simplified to realistically speaking, meld a new identity, but whatever. The philosophy that must stand behind this social revolution is that which I have once referred to as philosophical conscientism. Conscientism is the map in intellectual terms of the disposition of forces which will enable African society to digest the Western and the Islamic and the Euro-Christian elements in Africa and develop them in such a way that they fit into the African personality. The African personality is itself defined by the cluster of humanist principles which underlie the traditional African society. Philosophical conscientism is the philosophical standpoint which, taking its start from the present content of the African conscience, indicates that the way in which progress is forged out of conflict in the conscience. You know, actually, I do want to admit this. I know, I'm breaking away from the subject, but it's really, it's such a pressing issue. I want to admit, right? One of the reasons why the church is so prominent and powerful in Africa or anywhere, just like how the Islam is so powerful and practical in a sense, and why conscientism wouldn't be, is because at the end of the day, the church has a physical being. You know, one of the things that I do is I talk about Boko Waset Nakedo, you know, the idea of establishing Boko, establishing community centers, so on and so forth. This was one of the things behind Garvey's success as well. You know, he established thousands of Liberty Halls. You know, realistically speaking, you do want to have these physical institutions for people to gather in and form bonds in and form relationships in. And the reality is that, you know, if he had a church of conscientism or a mosque of conscientism, it would be more likely that there would be people who were saying, yeah, I'm a consciensis, right? But instead, he just had churches and was like, and as far as I can tell, you know, you have these churches and the church is saying we are this denomination. Now, technically, this conscientism would be another denomination of the church and another denomination of the mosque or just another altogether institution of itself. But if you do not have a physical building, right, and you just want your ideas to come out without a physical building, it's almost a moot point. And that kind of, I want to say, informs you as a thinker as well as me as a thinker, because I also want my ideas to materialize in some capacity. And I don't know if you want my ideas to materialize, but you might want your ideas to materialize. And if you do want your ideas to materialize, you know, definitely, fundamentally, I do encourage you to build a building, build an institution, build something somewhere in the community and invite people to study that ideology that you have, you know, because that, I think, is what, I think that's what Kwame Nkrumah could have done. And we could have had, you know, like a real secular pseudo-religious movement. But it seems like if you're just trying to attract people to an idea that is that you don't but while they gather for another idea, it's like it's not going to work. You know, if they're going exclusively to the church, then they're going to just exclusively get that ideology from the church. You know, because they're going weekly. Even if you read a book once, you know, it's not the same as going to read a book every week for 10 years. You know, that's the big difference. And of course, you know, if you're like a fan of mine, right? And you're not. But if you are a fan of mine, definitely go and get yourself a copy of the Book of Power and go read it to people every freaking week. Do that. You know, or this next book I'm going to do. But whatever it is, just like, let's do this, all right? Sorry to, you know, go on that little tangent, but, and of course I'm apologizing to a handful of people. But either way, you know, I think that's a pretty deep thought, and I want you to, like, nurse it and really consider it, because, you know, if we're really serious, because again, this is really good stuff, really heavy stuff, but it hasn't manifested, and it really, realistically speaking, won't manifest. You know, not unless somebody builds these institutions, and who wants to? You know, a lot of you have your own ideas, and that's sad, but it is what it is, right? This is the way of the world. So, its basis is materialism. The minimum assertion of materialism is the absolute and independent existence of matter. Matter, however, is also a plenum of forces which are an antithesis to one another. The philosophical point of saying this is the matter is thus endowed with powers of self-motion. Of course, there are diverse sorts of motion. Philosophers have accepted different kinds of phenomena as illustrating motion. there's the obvious case of change of place. If one object changes its position in relation to an object in a locality, it is said to move. Against this, it might be thought at first that the whole universe could revolve asymmetrically around an object, in which case it could in absolute terms be fancied that the object has not moved. If this happened, it would be indistinguishable from the first situation in which the object itself changes its position relative to the rest of the universe. It does not signify a difference. And if these putative two states do not signify a difference, the latter cannot constitute an objection to the former. So he's saying everything is in motion, right? And you could be saying, well, what about if everything is in motion except for one thing? And he's like, well, yeah, you would still say that thing that quote unquote not in motion is in motion, because this kind of goes back to like relativity in a sense where let's say it this way, like you're in traffic. Some people don't know relativity, right? So you're in traffic, or let's say you're standing on the side of a highway, right? And there are two cars driving next to each other, right? And then they pass you, okay? So from your perspective, two cars passed you, all right? Now, and from the perspective of the drivers, right? Let's say you're in the car now, right? The car next to you is not moving, right? The only thing that's moving is the person standing on the sidewalk. You get what I'm saying? So everything is relative in the sense that it's the person who's moving it, while your car is technically staying still by your frame of reference. So this is what he was talking about. Now, obviously, there's nothing in the universe that's but most people would not suppose that there's anything in the universe that's just not moving, but that's the phenomenon. That's the thing that he was referencing here. It's a little something you'd want to reread, but it's also like just relativity. Anyway, so let's go. The statement that an object moves to is a significant one. And when two significant statements fail in the above way to indicate a difference, they must signify the same thing. What I am enunciating here is quite other than the verification principle. The verification principle is has two parts. In the first place, it asserts a proposition to be significant only if it is subject to empirical verification. And in the second place, it asserts that the meaning of a significant proposition is yielded by its method of verification. The principle, which I am, on the other hand, anxious to defend, states no condition for meaningfulness, but only establishes a sufficient condition for identifying identity of meaning. The central idea is as follows. If there are two expressions such that precisely the same consequences follow from the conjunction of the first with any other proposition as follow from the conjunction of the second, and with the same proposition, then the two expressions are identical in meaning. So basically, again, he's just repeating this idea of, well, like if somebody happened to object to, well, something probably isn't moving. You can't tell that everything is moving in the universe, and he's just saying, well, it wouldn't make any difference to say something wasn't moving if other things are moving, because it would be moving in relative position to the other thing. Because remember, everything, like essentially where you are where you are. Like you're staying still. Like you're standing still. Let's say you stand up, you're standing still, technically. But you're also on a planet that is orbiting the sun, on a sun that is rotating around a galaxy, and on a galaxy that's racing out. That's rotating inside of a local cluster, and that local cluster itself is moving somewhere. And these are moving at breakneck speed. So, you might say, hey, well, I'm actually staying still. No, you're not. There's a lot of movement, a lot of motion, and it's only if there now the supposition is, of course, maybe there is something in this universe that is not moving at all, and everything else is moving. But what Kwame Nkrumah is saying is that it's effectively the same thing, because there's just motion. Like you're establishing that there's motion in the universe, and you can't deny it. Anyway, so you say it will be seen that this principle of identity of meaning is akin to Leibniz's principle of identity of meaning and to Frege's principle of identity of meaning. I have described one kind of motion which philosophers accept. They also distinguish rotary motion, which Plato illustrated with the movement of a top. There is, however, a third kind of motion which consists in alteration of property. If properties can be distinguished from relations, it can be said that there are two broad categories of motion, such that one introduces a change in relation, while the other introduces a change in property. Seeing that linear as well as rotary motion involves change of relation, if there are if there are these two kinds of motion, one resulting in a change of relation, other in a change of property, then when it is said that matter has an original power of self-motion, neither kind is necessarily implied, nor are both altogether. So, so basically he's saying that there's rotary motion is obviously spinning, like you're not moving positionally, but you're moving rotationally, right? So if you spin in the same position, then that's not necessarily linear motion, but it's still motion, right? And then of course he says change in property. Change in property, however, that could be like a chemical thing, like hydrogen into H2O, right? Or hydrogen and oxygen into H2O or something like that, where that's not necessarily a change in direction or space. It's not necessarily a rotation, but it is a movement nonetheless, or that's a form of motion nonetheless. Now you may not say that that's the case, but I'm just explaining what he's saying. Maybe he's going to establish it further so that we can more readily agree. But what he is saying is that even though there are things called self-motion, even though there's a phenomenon of self-motion, he's saying that this other kind of property is not necessarily implied just because these other ones are implied, right? So he says, it is fashionable in particular among philosophers who eschew dialectics to say that matter is inert. What this means must be distinguished from what the inertia of matter means in Newton. So Newton defined inertia axiomatically as, for example, in his first law of motion. According to this law, a body, except insofar as it is impressed upon by external force, continues in its state of uniform motion in a straight line. The position of rest is easily accommodated as a limiting case of motion in a straight line. Now, it is quite proper, instead of giving a direct definition of an introduced term, to elucidate its meaning by means of axioms. The axioms will in fact set out what one is to gather from the use of the introduced term. In the case of Newton's first law of motion, we see that here too a body's power of linear self-motion is denied. Indeed, Newton would also deny a body's power of rotary self-motion. To borrow a word invented by Whitehead, the inertia of matter corresponds to its pushiness. So this is, of course, he's saying that, basically self-motion, this idea that something will move itself, is contradictory to Newton's first law of motion, which is essentially that unless there is an external force, then an object will not move. Okay? So now he's going to, I am assuming he's going to address how either Newton is wrong, or how he's wrong, I guess, or how they reconcile, or how he can reconcile Newton's first law with the other thing. But obviously, for those of you who might not be familiar with physics or relativity, you could always utilize physics and relativity for that. So maybe that's what he's going to do, just a preface. But anyway, I'm just explaining to you guys what he said here. I'm hoping I'm doing a good job. If I'm not doing a good job, I don't know, sign off. No, I'm joking. If I'm not doing a good job, then I can't really help it. I mean, it's Nkrumah. I would never, I wouldn't personally give you all this. You know what I mean? This is actually a lie. But, if Nkrumah wants to give it to you and you want me to read it to you, then I'm gonna just explain to you just for the help of it. But yeah, you see the pushiness, basically the idea that matter is inert unless it's pushed, so on and so forth. So when it's inquired what the philosophers mean by the inertness of matter, something different transpires. In reality, the philosophers seek an intellectual parallel to physical motion and deny this of matter. Hence, we find them harping inconsequentially on the stupidity of matter. They mean by this that matter is incapable of intellectual action, neither thinking, perceiving, nor feeling. Of course, they are grateful for Newton's denial of the physical activity of matter. They take this up and increase it with a further denial of the intellectual activity of matter. Hence, when a philosopher says that matter is stupid, he does not mean that it is slow-witted, but that it has no wit at all. In this denial of activity, both physical and mental, of matter, it is, however, not unusual for philosophers to contradict themselves. If one looks through Locke's magnum opus, the Essay on Human Understanding, one quickly comes up with such a contradiction. So this idea is that here, he's saying that some Western philosophers are of the opinion that matter does not have an opinion. You know what I'm saying? Matter does not think, and so on and so forth. Now, obviously, this is bringing up another question, which is, if matter doesn't think and we're made out of matter, how do we think, right? But that's obviously another that's something that he's probably going to address. He also points out that Locke is going to contradict this idea of matter not thinking. So, and here he's going to probably say it right now. So there, Locke denies that matter is active, attributing all activity to spirit. Nevertheless, in this theory of perception, he says that corpuscles travel from a perceived object to our appropriate organ of sense in order that we should be able to perceive it. These corpuscles are said by him to be parts of the perceived object which detach themselves and subject us to a kind of radiative bombardment. Here, Locke patently contradicts himself, for this activity of matter is not said by him to be induced, but original, natural. So he's saying so I actually should be familiar with the word corpuscles, but I'm not. Either way, he's just saying that in Locke's theory that spirit, is what gives us this intelligence and all that kind of stuff, and our perception is based off of corpuscles, basically some form of matter that transports to our organs and makes us perceive. And essentially, it doesn't essentially what it does is that it says it's a materialist view that there's some sort of evidence of perception or spirit or what have you, and that's what he's saying is a contradictory for Locke. And it's just realistically speaking, it's just Nkrumah being a brilliant philosopher, or being able to look at earlier philosophers and this is like the thing that we as Africans do. Like we're able to look at earlier philosophers and say, this is where they were wrong, and then based off of that, you have like you deserve a platform. And this is like I said, this is partly one of those psychological things that we undergo as African people. Like if you look at Nkrumah as a man, as a human being, you kind of see, or as an African in the Western world, you kind of see a lot of this kind of stuff, right? But even the theory of gravity, while it does explain the current motions of body, including rest, is properly silent over the questions of antecedents. It does not face the question why bodies move at all. How is it that the heavenly bodies, for example, come to be moving, but only how they keep moving and why they keep moving as they do? So again, antecedents would be, okay, so you're like, hey, an object in motion will stay in motion, and an object in rest will stay at rest, okay? But there are objects at motion. Why are they at motion? Why are they at motion at all? Why? Why? Because if technically everything started at rest, right? Then why is it anything in motion? If, for instance, and you get it. Like if you can't have motion without, like if you can't have motion from rest, right? Then how, if you start off at rest, do you get motion? And if you assume that everything has always been at motion, then that's a question of, well, how is everything at motion? If, like how? Like that's the big question. So, and yet, those who conceive the universe in terms of an original superatom which multiplied internal stresses to such a pitch as to burst asunder, thereby imply that matter has powers of self-motion, for they do not conceive the primordial building up of internal stresses in terms of externally impressed forces. So he's talking about the Big Bang Theory. He's like, well, look, if you believe that the original motion came from a superatom which had internal stress, then you're saying there is self-motion because there's nothing outside of the universe that caused it. You get what I'm saying? So it contradicts this original law of motion, which is that an object at rest stays at rest, right? Because this object, this atom, would be an object that should have stayed at rest. But it didn't. It had its own motion, right? So both the phenomenon of radiation and the wave mechanics of quantum theory indubitably presupposes that body has original powers of self-motion, even in the sense which requires something other than a change of property. If matter perpetrates a spontaneous emission, then to the extent that there is an emission of particles, there is motion. To the extent that there's an emission is spontaneous, there is self-motion. Oh yeah, so sorry. So that was another one. So I did talk about change of property as in, my mistake, guys. If I talk about change of property as in like H2O to to like hydrogen and oxygen and H2O. This change of property he might be talking about is like quarks. It's like a quantum mechanical statement of essentially something could be, I think it's like I think it's like up or down. Yeah. So you can have a quark that's up or down. Basically, on the quantum level, there is there's a phenomenon where like a particle, I believe, but it's quantum mechanics is one of those things that you're supposed to like read up on before you speak on it. Like you're supposed to remind yourself, refresh your memory. But essentially, it's this, like when he says property, he's talking about you can have an up or down. I believe it's quark, right? So the quark can be either up or down, right? And it's just that's the property of it, and it happens spontaneously. It happens as soon as you measure it, apparently. So that's why they have these ideas about that kind of stuff. But it's a really interesting phenomenon, and what he's saying is that it just happens. Like essentially, it's a wave collapse, right? You have on a certain level, you have something that's like a wave, and then when you measure it, it's either up or down, right? And then when you measure it again, it's still whatever you measured it the first time, but it was only probabilistically up or down, right? It is only probabilistically, like before you measured it, it could have been up, it could have been down, but then when you measure it, it's always whatever it is that you measured it at, but that right there is also another motion. He's saying, which is it's a pretty interesting idea, because what the whole measuring thing does is that it really baffles a like classical physicists, right? It baffles classical physicists in the sense of it's a random thing that seems to only interact with being measured, it's it's just really random, like it's not like you measure it and then it's like you measure it again and it's still flipping and oscillating. It's that you measure it once and it's that. It's weird. It's just an interesting phenomenon. But all right, so both the phenomena of radiation and the wave mechanics of quantum theory indubitably presupposes that body has original powers of self-motion in a sense which requires something other than change of property. If matter perpetrates a spontaneous emission, then to the extent that there is an emission of particles, there is motion. To the extent that this emission is spontaneous, there is self-motion, right? The classical philosophers have in fact been overimpressed by at least two considerations. The first is that we do not discern a direct phenomenon of radiation or corpuscular motion by any of our celebrated five senses. But we do see apples thrown to go up, and we observe feathers blown to make them airborne. By contrast, even though we know of cases where humans and animals are pushed, we witness day after day the more overt and directly obtrusive phenomenon of spontaneous motion in living things. Our classical philosophers have then, without much ado, closed the dossier, pleasantly identifying the limits of their own knowledge with the limits of what can be. Right? Now, if one wishes to maintain the philosophical inertness of matter, one must ascribe the phenomenon of self-motion of bodies. Let me just double check if you can hear me. Okay. Self-motion of bodies to some non-material principle, usually a soul or a spirit. This soul or spirit may of course be said to inhere in matter or to be external to it, but even when it is said that there is spirit or soul in matter which is responsible for its spontaneous motion, it will not have been said that in every case of phenomenal spontaneous motion of a body, there must be presumed a spirit concealed in the body, a ghost lurking in the machine. Hence, the philosophical inertness of matter is not achieved by the mere postulate of spirit or soul. It is in fact made a defining characteristic of matter that it is philosophically inert. So again, he's saying, look, sometimes you might say matter is inert, but it's moved by spirit or soul. But even if you were to say that, to justify how you or I are moving, like for instance, I'm talking, right? How am I talking? What's making me talk? If I'm made out of matter, what is making me talk? Well, then it's like spirit or soul. But that still doesn't answer why other things without spirits or without souls are moving. If the assumption is that not every piece of matter has soul or spirit. Now, obviously, you could be of the opinion that everything has spirit and soul, but what Kwame Nkrumah was talking about right now is that that's not the case for some of these philosophers, right? So he says, in the postulate of a soul or spirit, vitalism and diverse forms of occultism could easily be provided sustenance and defense. But in this also, So he's like the different forms of occultism could easily provide sustenance for defense. But in this also we find the second consideration, which has overimpressed philosophers. This is the idea of intention. It was thought that spontaneous motion could only be deliberate or purposeful, right? Subsuming the idea of intention in any case. Deliberateness, purpose, intention was at the same time exclusively attributed only to living things, and not even to all living things at that. Matter in itself, non-living, was therefore held to be incapable of deliberateness, purpose, or intention. Spontaneity of any sort could not therefore be ascribed to it. This is in fact the heart of the philosophical inertness, which is quaintly called stupidity. So again, you get it. He's saying the spirit, like he's like, even if you do say, hey, well, everything has spirit, you're like, yeah, but not everything has intent. Not everything has intention and deliberateness and purpose, and that's where these quote unquote Western philosophers say, well, that's why matter is stupid. Even if it does move, it's still stupid, right? This is interesting, right? Hey, in a way, it is not the philosopher of today, but the natural scientists who are the successors of the ancient philosophers. Attentive to the phenomenon of radiation, that of spontaneous emission of particles of matter, and Newton's silence over the source of original motion of bodies, one can, if an inert philosopher, embrace a thoroughgoing animism and infuse non-living matter with a plethora of spirits, or one can correctly abandon the now groundless denial of the capacity of matter for self-motion. So he's like, instead of going about in the, well, matter is inert, but, there's animism and there's plethora of spirits that are doing it, we can just say, hey, you know what? Matter has self-motion. This is where, and so he's saying that the modern physicists, right? Shout out to the natural scientists. He said the natural scientists. Shout out to Nkrumah, Jope, Oni, right? I wish I was a natural scientist. All right, but I wish I still was a natural scientist. How about that? For those of you who don't know, I wrote this book called Zubiri, and in Zubiri, I put myself in as one of the characters, and as the character, I'm teaching astronomy or astrophysics in the book, because that's like, realistically speaking, as we progress inside of the society, I know I probably don't have much opportunity for political ambition, but I wouldn't mind doing some physics with you guys, but anyway, let's make it happen, right? All right. Indeed, the philosophical ancestor of all Western philosophers, Thales, was stared in the face by both alternatives. He had said that the world was not to be explained in terms of supernature, and had accordingly said that everything was water. It now fell upon him to explain why hosts of things were not watery. The minimum he could do was to put a principle of change in water itself, so that by the operation of that principle, the transmutation from the state we know as water to other things would be possible. But if he was not to abandon his first statement that everything is water, the principle must permit only geometrical changes in water, that is, in its operation. It must be limited to the rarefaction and condensation of water, right? For this, the principle needed to be a principle of motion. Hence, he said that things were full of gods. Though this smells unpleasantly of animism, he only meant, through asserting the capacity of matter for spontaneous self-motion, to reject its inertness. In saying things were full of gods, he did not mean that every object was the locus of some god, for his whole philosophical revolution consisted in the neutralizing of the gods, his rendering them irrelevant for purposes of explanation of the objects and processes of the world. It is his idiom, not his thought, which was picturesque. Just as Aristotle was later to recover the forms from Plato's heaven and restore them to matter, so Thales was now retrieving the source of motion and the cause of processes from the priest's heaven for matter. So, you guys get what he's saying. He's basically saying that Thales had this idea of everything having self-motion as well, by, in essence being water, but not everything being water, literally, or not being everything being water that's uncondensed and, just like how it's flowy. He's like, oh, well, we're also ice, and we're also gas and that kind of stuff, right? But it's still just fundamentally water. And, it's not really too off base. I mean, it is off base, but, essentially we are actually carbon-based, right? But notwithstanding that, there's also, realistically speaking, hydrogen, a lot of hydrogen. And, everything is, based off of hydrogen. So, hydrogen is the fundamental material of the universe, in a sense, or not the fundamental material, but the fundamental aspect of mass of matter is hydrogen. It's probably 70% of matter, right? Anyway, matter is, or seen matter, right? There's obviously dark matter, there's obviously dark energy, so on and so forth. But anyway, dark matter, right? But anyway, so let's go. Matter is not inert in the sense of the philosophers. It is capable of self-motion, both in the sense of a change of relation and in the sense of a change of property. But matter has inertness. Inertness and inertness has been sufficiently distinguished. No, inertia and inertness has been sufficiently distinguished, and while inertness implies inertia, inertia does not imply inertness. You know what's interesting when I just said dark matter? A lot of the motion of the universe is accounted to dark matter, right? So it is actually pretty interesting that essentially you wouldn't necessarily have a materialist view wouldn't actually be like you could alter the materialist view, or you could explain motion in this materialist view, notwithstanding matter being inert, just because dark matter could be a thing. And I'm actually surprised that, well, not surprised, but I would actually think that Kwame Nkrumah would have included that. So maybe he does include it later, but I would think that he would have included that in his consideration because he's very thorough. And dark matter, actually, I'm not too sure if dark matter was out when he was writing this. Actually, let me just double check that because that's actually a pretty interesting question. Because when people started talking about dark matter, it does really matter. It does really matter. Anyway, let me see something. Because I would have probably... Okay, yeah, so the hypothesis of dark matter has an elaborate history and a talk given in 1884 by Lord Kelvin. He estimated the number of dark bodies in the Milky Way from the observed velocity. But that's obviously just an obscure comment. 1933 is another one. 1939, return of the rotation curve. So it's really obscure, something's not adding up. And then it's the 1960s, 1970s. That's when it really came out. So the results were confirmed in 1978. So yeah. So, so the dark matter thing might have been after Kwame Nkrumah's time, But that would also add essentially that's where you could explain the motion of matter without saying that matter itself is moving, As I say, that you would have something external in the universe that nobody really understands, per se. That is, so it's actually, that's kind of, it sucks. It sucks, But you could appreciate it nonetheless. It probably doesn't take from it. It's just an interesting thing to consider. All right, so anyway, but matter has inertia and inertness has been sufficiently distinguished. And while inertness implies inertia, inertia does not imply inertness. And for those of you, some people could actually suppose that dark matter is, don't suppose. Don't suppose anything, right? Ooh, okay. I know. Some of you, I hear some of your brains going what is dark matter? Let me pause this video and discover some more dark matter. It's only going to talk more about dark matter, so I can go look up and read about dark matter. Don't do that. All right, so anyway, the initial assertion of what I put forward as philosophical conscientism are therefore twofold. First, there is an assertion of the absolute and independent existence of matter. So you see what I'm saying? It's the trouble is this, right? This is based off of the absolute and independent existence of matter, but theoretically, technically, since the 70s, it's been supposed that no, matter does not constitute the entirety of matter. You know what I'm saying? Or it doesn't constitute the entirety of mass in the universe, right? Or the mass in the galaxy, right? That there's some inexplicable mass. So what is dark matter? What's the supposition? What's the understanding for dark matter? For those of you who might be okay, Oni, come on, you got to explain it. Otherwise, I'm going to pause and I'm going to whatever, right? You got to give it to me. The idea is this, that the galaxy is held together, okay? The galaxy is held together based off of the mass of the galaxy, okay? It's following these physical rules based off of the mass of the galaxy. But if you were to look around and measure everything that you see, all the matter that you can detect, you look at it and you say, well, this galaxy would have flown apart already. You understand? This galaxy would have flown apart because there's not enough mass here to justify this galaxy being held together. So there has to be some other mass that is holding this galaxy together. Or something else entirely. Some of you guys, right? So I hear the brain. The brain's like, wait, what's this dark matter? But anyway, it goes back to this assertion of, well, it's the absolute and independent existence of matter, and it's like, well, if you mean if by matter you mean what we can see, then it's not necessarily the case that it's absolute and independent. Right? If by matter you also include what we can't see, which is dark matter, then that's another thing. And then the question becomes, you might say, well, where is dark matter? And, that's the big question, because technically it should be around us too. You know what I mean? I mean, like, I don't, like, what? Like, it's like, who knows? Like, technically you could have walked into it. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, did I just scare you? Is your mind going? All right, we're not do that. But like, are you thinking about spirits and stuff? Is that what you're doing? I don't know. Is that what you're thinking? All right. So anyway, all right. Second, there is the assertion of the capacity of matter for spontaneous self-motion. To the extent of these two initial assertions, philosophical conscientism is deeply materialist. Now, there is a supreme need to distinguish here between the materialism which is involved in philosophical conscientism and the materialism which implies the sole existence of matter. I pointed out in the first chapter that a materialist philosophy which accepts the primary reality of matter must either deny other categories of being or else claim that they are one and all reducible without leftovers to matter. If this does not present a dilemma, at least the choice is often painful. In materialist philosophy, admitting the primary reality of matter, its spirit is accepted as a category of being, non-residual reduction to matter must be claimed. Furthermore, the phenomenon of consciousness, like that of self-consciousness, must be held to be the ultimate analysis, nothing but an aspect of matter. So it's like your consciousness. Like, if the whole world is just matter, and not dark matter, guys, okay. If the whole world is matter, right, then the spirit is matter, and consciousness is matter. Now, technically, if... I mean, oh my gosh, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking to yourself, hey, look, if the universe is matter and dark matter, okay, and matter is not spirit or consciousness, then maybe dark matter is spirit and consciousness. Y'all said don't write a metaphysics book. Y'all said don't write a metaphysics book. But I won't say that. I don't know. Okay, you don't know. I don't know. But you know what I'm saying? All right, let me stop. I know you guys get excited. I mean, look, the reason why you're excited is because you're like, damn, this thing got only 20 views. You're like, this got 20 views. And he's talking about freaking dark matter. All right, let me stop. Okay, all right. So strictly speaking, the assertion... And look. I want you to do this. I know you're probably saying to yourself, this isn't just 20 views, right? Write down in the comment section how many views this is when you view it, okay? Write down in the comment section how many views this is when you do it. When you hear this, stop what you're doing. Pause. Say, write down the number. Okay, write down the number. I want to see that. I want to get a reminder. And, put the timestamp too. I want to get a reminder every time you watch this video. Every time you get this far into this video, I want to get a reminder so that people, and this is on YouTube or whatever, but even if not on YouTube, you could email me. Onineteen54, number 54, @gmail.com. You write me. Okay, you write me, this is how many views I got. This is how many downloads I got. Every time. Even if I passed away already, you know what I'm saying? You can still write my email address, until it rates back, message full, mailbox full, homie's been dead or whatever, right? But either way, just write me, okay? Write me and say this is the number, because it's like, damn. All right, let me stop. All right, so strictly speaking, the assertion of the sole reality of matter is atheistic. For pantheism, too, is a species of atheism. So actually, one of the brothers on Twitter was like, I don't agree with him saying pantheism is something of atheism. But yeah, atheism, yeah. He's like, if you just say everything is matter, it's atheist, right? Philosophical conscientism, even though deeply rooted in materialism, is not necessarily atheistic. So I was actually coming under the impression that he was on that atheism too, because Bitter Medicine actually asked me on Twitter, he's like, isn't Kwame Nkrumah a Christian? And I'm just like, this don't sound like no Christianity. You know what I mean? Like, this don't sound like no Christianity, I know. But he's gonna put it back. He's gonna be like, oh yeah, well, it ain't atheist necessarily. But anyway, according to the philosophical conscientism, certain activities possessing all the syndromes of purpose may still be the direct activity of matter. Philosophical conscientism, certain activities possessing all the syndromes of purpose may still be the direct activity of matter. Such activity is widespread and is characterized by a non-apperceptive response to stimulus. That is to say, it is characterized by a response to stimuli emptied of all self-awareness, a response devoid of any cognition beyond the reaction to that which is the time being acting as stimulus. Instinctive response is this kind of activity. For an instinctive response, there is a non-apperceptive response to stimulus, a response which is not conditioned by any realization of a possible relation of purpose between the stimulus and the stimulated. On the other hand, apperceptive response is deliberate. Here, there's a self-awareness and an appraisal of the situation involving stimulus and response. So, this is like the example I always like to give of the plant that bends towards the light. It's not necessarily self-awareness, oh, I got to go to the light. That's not what the plant is necessarily saying, but it does respond to the stimulus of sunshine and grow accordingly. Or just like if you see a bug, and you want to step on it, or like a fly and you want to slap it, technically the wind changes may cause the fly to fly away before you hit it, if you're not fast. No, I'm joking. I know, because some of you are like, man, I hit my flies every time, right? But yeah, like there's like it's to say that instinct and that kind of stuff, like flight or flight and all that kind of stuff. Like it might necessarily be conscious per se, but it is it has a purpose. Anyway, so the suspicion that living things exhibit non-apperceptive response is not new. Indeed, Descartes thought that the response of all non-human animals was non-apperceptive, and I'm guessing apperceptive has to do with perceptive, perception. He therefore denied that non-human animals possess souls, remaining content to believe that all the action of such animals could be given a mechanical explanation, which is complete. But even humans are not entirely above non-apperceptive response. Indeed, a response that starts by being apperceptive could in time be rendered non-apperceptive by the technique of producing a conditioned reflex. Aristotle had, before Descartes, maintained a similar opinion, that only humans were capable of self-conscious apperceptive response. This opinion of Aristotle was confirmed in his invention of the vegetable and the animal souls as distinct from the rational soul. So basically, Aristotle went a little further and said, hey, these things do have souls, but they have vegetable souls and animal souls, So lettuce has a soul, but it's a lettuce soul. Whereas humans have the rational soul. And of course, this is just a hierarchy to make humans the best thing on the planet. And Descartes, same thing, where he's just making humans better than all animals who have no soul. So, and it's a reasonable, it's a thing that, like I said, I try not to be such a human-centered person, notwithstanding the fact that I'm a person. And I do that just because, like realistically speaking, like again, we are not the center of the universe. We're not the great things of the universe. We're just a product of this universe, as much a product as any other thing around us. Any other living thing around us. Because we all came from that same single-celled organism once upon a time, right? It might seem that a philosophical position which accepts the duality of the Cartesian type cannot comfortably treat all the actions of animals as purely mechanical. For this kind of duality, there should ensue a nagging doubt, the doubt whether spirit as a category could not really be exercised with Occam's razor. Occam's razor, of course, is that idea that, the simplest thing might be the right thing, right? So it's like, is this really that simple, right? Is this the simplest answer? So according to Occam's razor, entities should not be multiplied without logical need. So, so he's like, entities shouldn't be multiplied without logical need. All right, but according to Cartesian duality, there are two irreducible types of substances. There is the spiritual substance, which is purely active, thinks and is non-extended. Then there is the matter, which is purely extended and is inert in the philosophical sense. Now, a great matter of the actions of animals are, as outward marks, quite similar to those of men. Yeah, so a lot of the actions of animals are very similar to how we act, right? How the dog acts is not, too unfamiliar. It is therefore a kind of special pleading to hold that these actions are spirit-produced in the one case and not in the other. especially since Descartes makes an issue of the existence of minds other than his own and God's. So, yeah, so that's a philosophical humor over there, where he's like, well, is there anything else in this world but Descartes' brain and God's, right? But, of course, and this is the irony, that the animals exist, the God that Descartes claims to exist doesn't exist, but that's the irony. It's like you're putting this imaginary being ahead of these real physical beings, whereas you and these physical beings are, as Nkrumah points out, you're sharing the same activities, you're doing the same things, more or less. Maybe you have more skill, more like much better communication skills, as far as we know, much better engineering skills. Like you might have that, but beyond that, it's you who's like they're more or less your equal, and yet this entity that's supposed to, this entity that doesn't exist, that's you put that above everything else. It's kind of remarkable, but it's stupid Western stuff. All right. Anyway, in order to remove this feeling that Occam's razor might be applied to shave out spirit, it is necessary to show, as distinct from claiming, that actions which have syndromes of being mind-inspired can result from mere matter. To do this is to show how some mind language is reducible without residue to body language. That is, to show how expressions which might be used in describing spirit-directed operations can be shown to be completely apt in describing mechanical action. Almost to show, indeed, the rudimentary minds are nothing but active matter. That this is so was in fact explicitly claimed by Leibniz, who said that matter was rudimentary mind, thereby breaking the categorical ice between matter and mind. So Leibniz was the opinion that matter and mind were one. In this first chapter, I discussed at some length how the categorical conversion or reduction is possible, making free reference in the course of the discussion of the work of logicians. If spiritual phenomena are in fact the outcome of material phenomena, then it is hardly surprising that environment, which is but a disposition of matter, can enhance, intensify, even develop the consciousness. Furthermore, the mind-body problem is solved. This solution of the mind-body problem has sometimes taken the form of cutting the Gordian knot. The mind-body problem arises in the following manner. If one says that there are only two types of substances, matter and mind, and furthermore allows interaction between them, then the question arises how there can be interactions between substances which are so disparate. Mind is purely active, thinks, and is unextended. Matter is passive, extended, and is without awareness. If one asserts the sole reality of matter, as extreme materialists do, or if one asserts the sole reality of spirit, as Leibniz must be deemed to have done, then the mind-body problem is solved by removing the condition in which the perplexity arises. This is to cut the Gordian knot, for now mind and body will not be disparate, but will either both be forms of matter or both be forms of spirit. So he's like, if you say that there's a mind and then there's matter, right, and you say that they're completely opposites, right, then how do they interact? Okay? But if you say mind and body are just different forms of matter, then you don't have that problem, because you're saying, matter. It's not that they're different; it's that they're just two parts of the same thing, Anyway, so in philosophical conscientism, however, the interaction of mind. So he's talking about now his philosophy. The interaction of mind and body is accepted as a fact. The philosophical perplexity which darkens this direction is removed by the demonstration of the possibility of categorical conversion. Categorical conversion must be distinguished from parallelism. Descartes himself tried to solve the mind-body problem by resorting to a kind of parallelism. He instituted parallel occurrences and thus explained pain as that grief which the soul felt as the damage to its body. On this point, as on several others, Descartes was assailed by the critical acumen of the Ghanaian philosopher Anthony William Amo. So, I'm actually wondering if this was his teacher. I think I remember reading about this guy, actually. But maybe not. Actually, let me look it up quickly. Very quickly. And I know I'm not showing you the screen. But I believe, let me see if I can actually show it to you guys. This is Wikipedia. Let me see if he knew Kwame Nkrumah. Okay, maybe not. Okay, maybe not. All right, my fault. I should have never even done it. I should have just looked it up first. All right. why do I say all this? Yeah. No, because he had a teacher that was like encouraging him to do stuff, and I wasn't sure if this was the guy, this gentleman. But basically, this person has, like challenged Descartes. Like, essentially, Descartes was like, hey, the reason why we feel grief after feeling pain is because, the soul is like, dang, you damaged my body, now I'm sad. And it's like, is that the thing, or is it the nervous system? You know what I mean? Right? Like, is it the nervous system, or is it just that the spirit inside of you? That kind of stuff. So, according to Amos, all the soul could do on Descartes' term is to take cognizance of the fact that there is a hole in its body or a contusion on it, and unless knowledge is itself painful, the mind could not be said to grieve threat, to grieve thereat. So it's like, Amos was saying, yeah, but why would, like, if the spirit were separate from the body, then why would it feel something? Of course, if the mind could be said to grieve in this way on bare knowledge of the state of the body, then one might say that the body could affect the mind, but not so necessarily, for, strictly speaking, according to Descartes, the body does not affect the mind, but the mind commiserates with the body. So Descartes is saying, no, the body cannot affect the mind. Instead, the mind kind of just like, oh, no, something happened. But, of course, anybody could say that that's ridiculous because, then you would always cry when you don't have an arm or something. Whereas you don't actually always cry when you don't have an arm. So it's really just a dumb idea, but that's why I couldn't really read through Western philosophy. It's like, it's kind of dumb, A lot of times you're just reading these dumb guys who, you're only reading them because they're white, pretty much. Anyway, on that note, though, I'm going to get some water. As you can tell, I sound kind of thirsty. This brother's starving, right?
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Greetings, everyone. This is Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, inviting you to tune in to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the revolutionary matron on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Pro-Black Perspective on KWAZ Radio.
All right. Good ass water. All right. And that's just an expression. Don't read too much into that. All right. So philosophical conscientism has no room for a mere parallelism on the mind-body problem. For philosophical conscientism retains the two categories of mind and body, recognizes the problem by accepting the fact of interaction, but offers a solution there too. Parallelism, which, while recognizing two categories, in fact denies interaction. The solution offered by philosophical conscientism is by way of categorical conversion. This idea is that the mind, or the matter, categorically converts into mind, and that's more than saying that they're parallel. Right? So let's go. According to philosophical conscientism, qualities are generated by matter. According to philosophical conscientism, qualities are generated by matter. Behind any qualitative appearance, there stands a quantitative disposition of matter, such that the qualitative appearance is a surrogate of the quantitative disposition. All right, let me be careful. Sorry. According to the philosophical conscientism, so philosophical conscientism is his philosophy, right? Or is a philosophy that, it's his philosophy that he's expounding, right? Qualities are generated by matter, okay? Matter generates the qualities. Behind any qualitative appearance, right? The qualitative appearance might be, size or length, whatever, right? There stands a quantitative disposition of matter, such that the qualitative appearance is a surrogate of the quantitative disposition. So if you see quality, it has to do with the quantity, right? I do not mean by that qualities are the quantities themselves. I am not, for example, saying that the color is the same thing as a certain wavelength. No, I am not, for example, saying that a color is the same thing as a certain wavelength. Of course, the wavelength is not the color, though we do know, thanks to the physicists, that individual colors are tied to characteristic wavelengths, right? So, because I was like looking at that like, what? Of course they are, right? But what I'm, however, saying is that the color is precisely the visual surrogate of a wavelength. A color is the eye's mode of impression of a wave with certain mathematical properties. It is the visual surrogate of a quantitative disposition of matter, right? Make sure you guys hear me. Good. All right. Sound, similarly, as the ear's mode of impression of waves with certain properties. In general, sensations and perceptions are sensory surrogates of quantitative dispositions of matter. All natural properties, whatever property is discernible by medium of one sense or more, are nothing but sensory surrogates of quantitative dispositions of matter. So that does make sense. Now, how he says it is, it might not make sense to everybody, but what he's saying is this, and this is actually really important. Everything that you see is the reflection of light off of the surface of whatever it is that you're looking at. Okay? And everything that you hear is just the reverberation on your eardrums, right? So like you're hearing me right now, my voice is coming at you, and it's sending out a wave, right, of I guess you could say an auditory wave or whatever, right? But it's sending out this wave, and this wave is just going to vibrate your eardrum. And in vibrating your eardrum, you hear, based off the frequency of what I'm saying, the frequency and pitch of what I'm saying, and the tonality of what I'm saying, if you will, right? But that's you now making words out of what I'm saying, right? And that's partly, that's you just hearing me do that. That's partly why, like, I guess how animals talk and how animals hear might not necessarily parallel how we talk and how we hear. Nevertheless, that's what's going on. It's the same with the reflection of the light towards us. And, as you may already know, some animals are colorblind. And, notwithstanding all things considered. That said, yeah, he's right. There's the quantitative disposition, which is the frequency that makes you so that you hear me. And just the same as the wavelength that makes you see something. And then there are a lot of light wavelengths that you do not and cannot see. Like they're out of the visible spectrum, but they're there, like infrared and like ultraviolet. So the sun is radiating ultraviolet, UV rays, right, that you can't see, but they're all over. And the same, your body is releasing infrared by virtue of just having your body having a heat signature, but you can't personally see that heat signature. Now, that's what he's saying. It's like the quantitative property towards all of your sensory inputs. So in the first chapter, I refuted the claim that Einstein's theory of relativity was incompatible with materialism. The gravamen of the objection was that philosophical materialism requires the absolute and independent existence of space and time as necessary receptacles for matter. At this point, I explained that there was no conflict with the theory of relativity, as also that materialism was itself inconsistent with the absolute and independent, and also that materialism was itself inconsistent with the absolute and independent existence of space and time. If the sole existence of matter is asserted, then space and time, insofar as they are not matter, must be unreal. Okay. Philosophical conscientism does not assert the sole reality of matter. Rather, it asserts the primary reality of matter. Here again, if space were absolute and independent, matter could not, with respect to it, be primary. Therefore, philosophical conscientism, in asserting the primary existence of matter, also maintains that space must, to the extent that it is real, derive its properties from those of matter through a categorical conversion. And since the properties of space are geometrical, it then follows from philosophical conscientism that the geometry of space is determined by the properties of matter, right? So that's actually pretty interesting. This is probably where I could see people disagreeing with this theory, right? Because essentially what he's saying is that even space now space and, of course, time are properties of matter, right? Now, look, he's dealing with the general relativity, so general relativity actually might have that as a supposition, because what happens is that space and time are manipulated by mass, okay? As to say that, like, the Earth is not necessarily being pulled. Like, the Newtonian physicists would say Earth is being pulled by the sun, and that's why it's rotating. And what general relativity and relativity would say is that no, the sun is curving space-time, and the Earth is traveling around a geodesic, which is the shortest route, the shortest the path the shortest path around the sun, you know, or it's just traveling the shortest path. Yeah, that the sun is curving the space-time continuum, sort of thing. So it sounds a little complicated. I'm not gonna hold you. I really should reread some more general relativity. Or I should read the general relativity. I have a book. I got it from my uncle after he passed away, and I was supposed to read it. It was like a decade ago, but I just haven't. It's a short book, so I should do it. But basically, we'll see. So I can't necessarily. So he's obviously Nkrumah knows more about general relativity right now than I do, but I would say that this is where maybe people might be like, wait a second, you're taking the materialism a little too far when it actually is considered when space is considered a property of space, you know, that's when you might be like, okay, maybe not, right? But we'll see. So when one now turns into Einstein's general theory of relativity, one finds exactly the same conclusion there. For in this theory, Einstein relies on the principle of Mach's about the conditions of significance to affirm that properties of space are fixed by the masses of body in a gravitational field. This principle of Einstein's, like philosophical conscientism, rejects the absolute and independent existence of space. With regard to space, relativity and philosophical conscientism are mutually consistent. So, like I said, I did just kind of explain that to you, that yes, space is warped by mass, you know? Now, well, whether that means that space is in fact just mass is a question, but you know, but like whether that means that whether that means that mass is primary over space is another question altogether. But it is the case that space itself is warped by mass and that kind of stuff, you know. Also, one of the things that you might be interested in that Einstein he postulated with this general relativity, that, you know, like one of those kind of evidence that you would have is this idea of, you know, light rays. Light rays travel in a line, you would think, right? Or they travel the geodesic, like I said, the line, right? The shortest distance between 2 points is a line in flat space, right? But if space is curved, then it's no longer a straight line, you know? As to say, like this, if you like the shortest route between New York and Ghana, right, is going to be a curved line because space is curved on the planet Earth, right? It's not going to be a straight line because, I mean, of course you could say, well, it's a straight line that goes through the Earth, but if we're talking about being on the surface of the Earth, then it's not going to be a straight line, right? So basically, like, that curvature is, like, think about that curvature, think about mass itself curving space itself. And so what happens is that, you know, one of the experiments was this idea of these eclipse, and the moon would go in front of the sun, and if the moon went in front of the sun, you could see the light rays coming out of the sun all the more clearly. And when you measure these light rays coming out of the sun, you realize that they are curved based off of the gravitational disturbance that is, I can't recall if it's either the moon or if it's the sun or whatever is curving the space. But the reality is that curvature in and of itself kind of proves this idea, this notion that space is curved by, space bends by mass, right? And of course, you know, time and space, you know, they're obviously related. So, but that's more like the relativity thing where I said, you know, like the cars are moving, but are they moving, you know, if you're on the car, if you're in the car, you know what I mean? Like when you're sitting on a bus with a bunch of people or sitting on a train with a bunch of people, are the people in the train moving while the train is moving? You know what I mean? Or is it the people outside the train that are moving, you know? You know what I mean? Like, because, like, when do you assume something is not moving? Because, again, we're on a planet that's moving. The planet is in the solar system that's moving. Like, when do you assume something is not moving? Well, it's always relative to the observer. And then, you know, the physical laws that you apply to, like physical laws apply differently towards, relative movement between things. But if things are not moving, and then the same phenomena happens, then what are the physical laws that correspond and correlate with that? You know what I mean? As to say that, yeah. So it becomes a more interesting question as you approach the speed of light in your movement. Because certain things happen as you approach the speed of light in your movement, and all that kind of stuff. Especially considering that light will still appear to be the speed of light, notwithstanding how fast you're going. Because if you're going 0.5 the speed of light will still look as if it were moving the speed of light, notwithstanding the fact that you are relatively fast toward it. It's a whole physics conversation. If you want a physics professor, let me know. But anyway, so in discussing the possibility of categorical conversion, I said that two approaches were available to philosophy. First, the possibility of categorical conversion can be demonstrated in conceptual. Maybe I should do that. Sorry, I did a little typo, but maybe I should do a relativity course. All right. So in discussing the possibility of categorical conversion, I said that two approaches were available to philosophy. First, the possibility of categorical conversion can be demonstrated in conceptual terms. This has been achieved by modern. I just got a thought. I was like, am I even recording? Can you imagine just standing here for hours? Yeah, let me just make sure. Or just an hour, but still. So anyway, you're just talking to yourself. It's a good book though. I would just be pissed. First, the possibility of categorical conversion can be demonstrated in conceptual terms. This has been achieved by modern logic. Second, models fulfilling the condition of categorical conversion might be cited. Such models are offered by modern science. So, first, the possibility of categorical conversion can be demonstrated in conceptual terms. This has been achieved by modern logic. Second, models fulfilling the conditions of categorical conversion may be cited. Such models are often offered by modern science. Okay. Philosophical conscientism claims the reality of categorical conversion, but if the conversion from one category to another category is not to represent a mere apparition, a philosophical will-o'-the-wisp, then such a conversion must represent a variation in the mass of its inertial matter. The conversion is produced by a dialectical process, and if it is from a lower logical type to a higher logical type, it involves loss of mass. Here again, the loss of mass actually takes place is deducible from Einstein's general theory of relativity. It follows from this theory that every chemical change from simpler substances to more complex substance, insofar as it entails the emergence of new properties, represents a loss of mass. Indeed, it represents a conversion of part of the mass of matter. In Einstein's theory, the loss is calculable according to the general formula E equals mc squared, where E represents ergs of energy, m mass, and c the velocity of light. If, for example, 1 gram of mass were substituted for m, the equivalence in energy in ergs of energy will be 9 times 10, not 20 to the 10th power of ergs. For in this case, E will be equal to c squared. According to philosophical conscientism, however, though the whole of this amount of mass is converted, it is not all of it which is converted to the emergent property. In actual chemical changes, some of it transpires as heat. It is this reality of categorical conversion which prompts philosophical conscientism to assert not the sole reality of matter, but its primary reality. If higher categories are only surrogates of quantitative processes of matter, they are still not empty apparitions, but are quite real. It follows from this in philosophical conscientism matter is capable of dialectical change, for if natural properties are nothing but surrogates of quantitative dispositions of matter, then since natural properties change, matter must change in quantitative disposition. And matter, in being a plenum of forces in tension, already contains the incipient change in disposition, which is necessary to bring about a change in quality or property. Force itself is the way in which particles of matter exist. It is this mathematical or quantitative constitution. Force is not a description of a particle of matter. It is not something which particles of matter wear on their face. Rather, it is internal to them. Okay, so this, I don't know, I just got my phone. What's my phone doing? So, yeah, this was a lot. It's like a family thing, family group text kind of thing. this was a lot. I got distracted a little bit, but essentially, this equals MC squared thing. I told you guys about this before, but in essence, and by before I mean like an earlier podcast. You know what's interesting? He has 9 times 10 to the 20, like 20 to the 10th power. Why would you have 20 to the 10th power? That's an interesting way to showcase that speed of light. Why would he do 20 to the 10th power? That's a weird way to show the speed of light. Because usually for those kind of digits, you would not, like, that's not scientific notation, right? Yeah, so usually, when I look it up, it's 9 times 10 to the 16th, like 9 to 10 to the 10 to 16th. I don't think that's 20 to the 10th power, but, it actually might be. Hold on a second. 20 to the 10th power. Sorry, that's kind of interesting. It's interesting that he would write it that way, 20 to the 10th power. 20 to the 10th power is 1 times 10 to the 3rd power. Yeah, so no, I don't know why he put that 10 to the... I don't get it. But, it's just an interesting way of writing that number. Very interesting. Like, I haven't seen that before. So, that was interesting. But anyway, but let's just go back to this, what we were talking about. Yeah, so mass, so on and so forth. This was, he's like, energy exists, right? But energy is a byproduct of mass, okay? Because mass is primary, and energy, or matter is primary, but energy can be a byproduct of that. And now, of course, he says force itself is in the way in which particles of matter exist. It is a mathematical or quantitative constitution. Force is not a description of a particle of matter. It is not something which particles of matter wear or they face. Rather, it is internal to them. So he's like, force is also another qualitative part of matter. Like, basically, it's like, in order to... It's kind of like the Namas thing, because, essentially, what Nkrumah is doing is he's following the tradition of this individual called Thales, okay? So Thales has this idea that everything is water, and Nkrumah is just saying, well, it's not that everything is water, it's everything is matter. And I'm going to explain to you, and I'm going to show you how in science that there are other things that you would say are not matter, right? And to dispute the idea that everything is matter, and I'll say, no, look, these are actually still matter, Energy is just a byproduct of matter, and now he's even saying force, right, is just something that's internal to matter. It's another, it's just another sort of matter kind of thing, right? Tension and all that kind of stuff. And being a plethora of tension already contains the incipient position, so on and so forth. So since matter is a plenum of forces and tension, and since tension implies incipient change, matter must have the power of self-motion original to it. Without self-motion, dialectical change would be impossible. So again, he's like, like force is internal to, like that, like whereas the assumption is, Newtonian mechanics, right? The assumption is an object will change by force from the outside. What Kwame Nkrumah was asserting is that no, force is actually internal to things. Everything is matter. It's a really interesting materialist position. So that was probably the more complicated. This was the more complicated part. This one was more straightforward, but hopefully you get it. This is just like, again, this is the president of Ghana. Like, while he's the president of Ghana, no less, and he's deeply intelligent, deeply philosophical. I'm thoroughly impressed, obviously. So since matter is a plenum of forces and tension, and since tension, by a dialectical change, I mean the emergence of a third factor of a higher logical type from the tension between two factors or two sets of factors of a lower logical type. Again, antithesis, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Okay? That's what it is. He says, matter belongs to one logical type, properties and qualities of matter to a higher logical type. Matter belongs to one logical type, properties and quantities of matter to a higher logical type, properties of properties to an even higher logical type. All right. This appropriately raises questions of an epistemological nature about conscientism. Epistemological problems are those which concern the nature of knowledge and its type, and also the avenues to them which are open to the mind. Conscientism, by avoiding the assertion of the sole reality of matter, prepares itself for the painless recognition of the objectivity of different types of being. Indeed, the conception of dialectic is itself connected with a recognition of different types of being. Types of being are logical types. If they form a scale of being, it is not to be inferred that this scale is correlated with a scale of value. The types are logical types, such that material objects form one logical type. Those general terms which can be applied in description only to material objects form a higher logical type. Those general terms which can be applied in description to general terms of the first group form another logical type, which is even higher. Now, again, this is again, he's a dialectical materialist. So he's going to talk about dialectics a lot. Dialectics is really just this idea of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, right? So it's really heavily complicated. My mind is actually going towards, I should really include in my next book that that note on dark matter, because I really realized that even me talking about dark matter is like, what you guys, like, a lot of you are just like, what are you talking about, dude? And I just feel like when I'm writing a book, I should include everything I could possibly. So that's I just want to just do that. Just want to add it. I just made a note. Sorry. Even when you're doing things, when you're distracted, you should actively be trying to develop your own portfolio. So make sure you're taking notes. I'm taking notes. You should be taking notes. Right? Material objects and their properties belong to different logical types. So this right here is kind of a lot. Not a lot, but in saying logical type, it's really, like, he doesn't explain it per se, and I'm waiting for him to explain it. But basically, he's just saying that things can develop to higher logical types, like matter can develop into higher logical types based off of this self-motion idea, based off of this idea of dialectics, where something can be something, but in its motion towards other things, it can eventually become something bigger than itself, just off of its own self-motion, because it's changing in a dialectical way. And in dialectics, that means basically that it is changing into something new from having two different components that meld together to make something new, So you have the thesis, you have the antithesis, and then you combine to make something different, the synthesis. So insofar as you can do that, you can transform and change into something, and that's where this new logical form is. Now, what this logical type means is not really clear, but like, again, when you're reading these kind of things, you just kind of, at some point, you just read it to try to get to the point that they're going to get, because that he's not getting to the point yet. This is one of those types of writings that, like, I try not to do this. I try to be succinct. I try to be succinct, but that like, being succinct also hurts too. Because sometimes, like, one of the things about Zubiri. So I tell you guys to read the Zubiri. Like, nobody really buys Zubiri. Okay. Why you don't buy it? Because it's too small. It's too short. It's succinct, right? You know what I mean? Like, you're like, I'm not gonna spend any money on something that short. So there's pros and cons. Anyway, like if Kwame Nkrumah writes a philosophy text and it's like a handful of sentences, no one's gonna buy it. No one's gonna take it seriously. So you have to, like, put in a lot more. It's just one of those things. Material objects and their properties belong to a different logical type, and so do material objects and mind. And these differences, so he's like, so properties and material objects are different logical types, as well as material objects and mind. So to say that they're, like, he's saying that dialectical change can happen in which you can have material objects that eventually develop into the mind, right, by the dialectical change. So you see now where it comes in, right? So in these, and I hate that I do that, right? I hate that I do that. I'd be like, well, it's not explained, then it's like the next sentence. All right. But, I did read an extra paragraph. All right. And these differences in type which make categorical absurdity possible, right? It is these differences in type which make categorical absurdity possible. By categorical absurdity, I mean that special absurdity which arises from coupling types of terms which should not be coupled. Terms can be coupled only when they belong to the same type or belong to approximate types. Thus, people and independence belongs to approximate types and may therefore be coupled as the proposition, we are and independent people. But the number 2 and red neither belong to the same type nor belong to approximate type. Hence, not unexpectedly, the proposition the number 2 is red, which couples them, does commit a categorical absurdity. So basically, those are categorical absurdities. I think he's saying the categorical absurdities are possible, right? Yeah, so because of dialectical materialism, you can have categorical absurdities that don't make any sense, like you could have the number 2 is red, right? In the same way, terms which can be coupled with philosophical surrogates and descriptions of the latter cannot be coupled with the item which gives rise to the surrogates, though there is nothing which is incapable of translation without residue to propositions about these ideas whose surrogates they are. Terms which can be coupled with philosophical surrogates and descriptions of them cannot be coupled with the items which give rise to the surrogates. Because if a term can be coupled with a philosophical surrogate, it must be of the same logical type as the philosophical surrogate, or if it is in description of it, must be of a type higher than and proximate to that of which surrogate belongs. Terms which can be coupled in descriptions with a philosophical surrogate must be one logical type higher than the surrogate, since such terms are always one type higher than their subjects. As such, these terms are at least 2 types higher than the items which give rise to the surrogate. They cannot therefore be ascribed even by way of complement. One cannot say that the number 2 is a red thing complement any more than one can say the number 2 is red description. Okay. Yeah, so actually when I was reading this, I was thinking about the solipsism for some reason. But yeah, so basically again, it's just like philosophical absurdities that this is more heavyweight, you know. It's like, if you really want to understand it, just pause the video and reread. It's like, the thing is that when he writes this, it's not like when you're writing, he'll explain it if it's that because again, this is the ideology and philosophy of decolonization. This is more so background for that. The epistemological consequence of philosophical conscientism provides an antecedent philosophical justification for such pursuits as the investigation of the nature of mind by the exclusive means of the investigation of the nature and functioning of brain. This is a great advantage, for as the mind... Actually, no, let me go back and just explain it to you. I know. I should just explain it to you, because otherwise you're going to be like, damn, brother, why didn't you explain it to me? All right, so let's say terms can be coupled with the philosophical surrogates. A description of them cannot be coupled with the items which give rise to the surrogates, right? So the terms that can be coupled with philosophical surrogates and descriptions of them cannot be coupled with the items which give rise to the surrogates. Because if a term can be coupled with a philosophical surrogate, it must be of the same logical type as a philosophical surrogate, or as a description of it must be of a type higher than or approximate to that which a surrogate belongs. So there's a philosophical surrogate, and you cannot couple it with the item itself, because you can't couple it unless it's proximate to what it is, whereas he's going to point out that these terms are actually 2 logical types higher, right? So that's self-explanatory, right? Not self-explanatory, but basically he's just giving a definition of something that, if it's important, we'll understand it. If it's not important, it's just an interesting philosophical thing. And this is the thing that I want to explain to you too. That that's what Wazungu does. He gives you a bunch of this heavy stuff, and it's like, if you really it'll make you feel like, I don't understand, I don't get it, right? And it's just not like, don't boggle yourself with it. Pretty much, just be like, yeah, okay, I got you. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, you want the meat and potatoes. You know what I'm saying? You want the meat and potatoes, and this is just the garnish. Okay? And that's one of the things you want to do when you're reading. Like I said, when you study physics, there's this idea of signal versus noise. You're looking for the sky, there's a star out there, and if you're looking for the star, the reality is that there's going to be like 100 other stars in your sight. So you have to signal out, so the signal is the star that you're looking at, and the noise is the other stars. So over here, the noise is the definition of some sort of term that we're probably not going to use, because what is a philosophical surrogate, right? What is that, right? Is it going to be relevant to anything? Probably not. And if it is, if later on you're reading and it's like, well, the philosophical surrogate, you're like, okay, let me go look back and see what that is. Or the logical type, let's go look back what that is. But otherwise, it's just noise. And you got to be able to do that. If you want to be an effective reader, you kind of want to just, just look for the signal, So the epistemological consequence of philosophical conscientism provides an antecedent philosophical justification for such pursuits as the investigation of the nature of mind by the exclusive means of the investigation of the nature and functioning of the brain. This is a great advantage, for as the mind is not subject to experimental exposure, if all propositions about mind is in principle translatable without residue to propositions about the nervous system, which is subject to experimental exposure, then a great deal of mental research can be done in terms of neural research. In general, philosophical conscientism narrows down the extent of academic hermitage. It does this by making research into the nature of one category possible in terms of another category. Okay, so basically what right here is actually pretty, like, it's a lot of words, but basically he's like, mind is a result, like your mind is in your brain, okay? And your brain operates by a nervous system. So if you want to study your mind, you could study your nervous system, and that's possible through philosophical conscientism, because it doesn't say, oh, well, your mind is the spirit, and therefore you have to study spirits somehow. It's saying, how are you going to study spirits? I don't know. I'm going to go sit down and pray or something, right? No. What he's telling you is that if you're trying to study the mind, or the part of you that thinks, you could just study the neurons, the neural pathways, and that's something that physically you can actually study. So that's actually pretty interesting, pretty good description. I mean, this was the basis of it. It was a little complicated, but this was, like I said, it just wraps up when you just read ahead. A lot of reading is just reading ahead. There is a growing tendency among some philosophers who hold the view that when materialism has triumphed and has won victory over idealism, it must, like its victim, disappear or wither away as a philosophy. It is envisaged that this will take place when the class of society is achieved. Marx and Engels regarded materialism as a true form of science, and indeed held that with this final overthrow of idealism, materialism must have science for its positive content. What is important is not so much that it may not be necessary to stress materialism as a philosophy when idealism is overthrown, but rather that the importance and correctness of materialism will not in any way be diminished in its hour of victory. Some philosophers expect that materialism will then disappear and give way to a philosophy of mind, and that philosophical theory of the mind, which is not explicitly prefaced by philosophical materialism, will open the door to a new idealism. Again, this is just like banter. Like just showing off how well read he is, in the sense that he's saying that when materialism is finally achieved, and there's a good class of society, idealism may resurface, because just as idealism disappears from materialism, when materialism is complete, then materialism itself will disappear, which is it's not really warranted. It's just superstition in a sense. All right. So, thought without practice is empty, and philosophical conscientism constantly exhibits areas of practical significance, like the one above. A philosophical conscientism initially affirms the absolute and independent existence of matter, and holds matter to be endowed with its pristine objective laws. The philosophical conscientism builds itself by becoming a reflection of the objectivity in conceptual terms of the unfolding of matter. When a philosophy so restricts itself to the reflection of the objective unfolding of matter, it also establishes a direct connection between knowledge and action. Like, what he's basically saying is that that's like I just said, it's a superstition that materialism itself will disappear because materialism was accepted by people. It's just stupid. It's like a saying that, like, it's just dumb. It's like, again, that's the thing I don't like about white people, man. They just say dumb things, but they get all this credit. And this is why, you have like Amo, right? The one that the Ghanaian philosopher. That you have Nkrumah, and you have myself as well. We're just like pissed at white people, because they just say dumb shit, and we're just tired. We're like they get this esteem, they get this, it's, let me stop, okay? Let me stop. But, you get it. It's like, oh my gosh, like, I tell you, I was in grad school, I was just like sitting next to these white boys, and I'm like, how are you here? Like, how are you here? But, shit. All right. The idea of a philosophy as the conceptual image of nature is also found in Spinoza. And indeed, it is the tenet of rationalism in general. According to Spinoza, at least, the order and connection of ideas is the same as the order and connection of nature. The mistake of the rationalists regarding the connection between philosophy and nature is in their treating philosophy as the blueprint, the straitjacket. Sorry, let me get another sip of water. All right. The idea of a philosophy as a conceptual image of nature right? Philosophy is the conceptual image of nature. It is also found in Spinoza, and indeed, it is the tenet of rationalism in general. According to Spinoza, at least the order and connection of ideas is the same as the order and connection of nature. The mistake of the rationalists regarding the connection between philosophy and nature is in their treating philosophy as the blueprint, the straitjacket for nature, instead of being content with a mere assertion of mutual reflection. If, however, the order and connection of ideas is the same as the order and connection of nature, then according to Spinoza, knowledge of the one order and connection must be knowledge of the other order and connection. Indeed, it can be said that according to Spinoza, mind is the idea of the whole body of that. No, mind is the idea of that whose body is nature. Okay? To the extent that he allows action to be possible, knowledge of the mind can be the direct objective basis of an intervention in nature. I said earlier on that in spite of the profound cleavage between idealism and materialism, they did not present different inventories of the world. This hardly means, however, that they share the same attitude to the world. They certainly differ in their conception of the nature of the connection between thought and action. In this field, idealism is jejune and grotesquely ineffectual. Materialism is, on the other hand, dynamically and constantly throws up areas of practical significance. Again, he's going to do a lot of comparisons between his philosophy, i.e. materialism, and other philosophies, and he's going to show that the other philosophies are inferior, but it's going to take up a lot of time to explain. So, realistically speaking, I should just read through it, just because it's like, why are you... Like, I don't see the purpose in, pointing out, oh yeah, idealism is not that great, particularly because there's nobody who's saying they're idealists, let alone people claiming they're materialists. But, and nobody outside of the philosophical schools or philosophy schools, but it is what it is, But if philosophical conscientism connects knowledge with action, it is still necessary to inquire whether it conceives this connection as a purely mechanistic one, or whether it makes it susceptible of ethical influence and comment. As to say, so that again, are actions just mechanical, or are they ethical as well? So, and now he's going to try to establish how ethics comes about. So it is evident, at least, that the philosophical conscientism cannot issue in a closed set of ethical rules, a set of rules which must apply in any society and at any time. Philosophical conscientism is capable of this because it is itself based upon a view of matter as caught in the grip of an inexorable dialectical evolution. So here he takes that step where he says, look, you can't have a fixed set of rules, fixed set of ethics, because matter itself is always evolving, right? If we're basing our philosophy off of matter, then we cannot have any sort of rigidity, any sort of fixedness, because matter is not rigid or fixed. Matter is evolving, therefore even ethics will be evolving, right? All right. So anyway, to the extent that materialism issues in egalitarianism on the social plane, it issues in ethics. Egalitarianism is not only political but also ethical, for it implies a certain range of human conduct which is alone acceptable to it. At the same time, because it conceives matter as a plenum of tensions giving rise to dialectical change, it cannot freeze its ethical rules with changelessness. It would be wrong, however, to seek to infer from this that the ethical principle which philosophical conscientism sanctions are at any one time gratuitous and devoid of objective grounding. For even when rules change, they can still be informed, still be governed by the same basic principles in the light of changing social conditions. It's necessary to understand correctly the relationship between rules and principles. The relationship is similar to that between ideals and institutions, and also of that between statutes and bylaws. Statutes, of course, state general principles that do not make explicit their procedures by means of which they must be carried out and fulfilled. Bylaws, as an application of such principles, it is obvious that when the conditions in which bylaws operate alter seriously, it could be necessary to amend the bylaws in order that the same statute should continue to be fulfilled. Statutes are not on the same level as bylaws, nor do they imply any particular bylaws. It is because they carry no specific implication or a particular bylaws that can be subserved by any one of a whole spectrum of such that it is possible to amend bylaws, while the statute which they are meant to fulfill suffers no change. So, of course, he's talking about the dynamicism of ethics, and thereby comparing it to, it's not necessarily that ethics are going to be ever changing, or like essentially there's going to be some sort of consistency in his philosophy of ethics, notwithstanding the fact that he's allowing for a constant transformation of the thing. And so he's saying, well, there are statutes and bylaws and so on and so forth. Now, I'm not going to necessarily say that this follows logically from, or this follows independently from his reasoning on so on and so forth, but of course he still says it because it's necessary. Otherwise, he would end up in the same sort of atomism that he disagreed with, I think in chapter 1, right? So anyway, let's keep going. The relationship between ideals and institutions is a similar one. The circumstances change is a truism. For all that, it is significant, for it means that if ideals must be pursued throughout the changing scenes of life, it may be necessary to modify and replace institutions in order that the same ideals should effectively be served. There are no particular institutions which, irrespective of local circumstances, are uniquely tied to their ideals. Institutions should be shot through and through with pragmatism. So again, he's saying, look, you don't have institutions that maintain themselves throughout time. Shoot. You know what? I totally forgot that my son's mother was going to pick him up. So what I'm going to do is, when she arrives, I'm going to give her. Shoot. All right. So it's going to be a little bit of a pause. I'm sorry. I apologize, but I totally forgot. Basically, what happened was I was supposed to do. I'll give you some context. I was supposed to do a video today. Like, somebody was supposed to record me and them talking about something. They canceled on me without me knowing, right? But they said I was supposed to record it at 10 a.m. Because they were in East Africa. In East African time, they were going to do it at 5 p.m. They never told me, like, they just canceled on me. So I woke up at 7 a.m. and I was sitting around pretty much, doing other things when I should have been recording. I didn't get to record. I went to go get my, by the time 10 or 11 came up, I decided to get my son some food, get him some food. Then after he ate, I decided to start this recording. But I forgot that because today is Friday for me, my son's mother, I just came back from Africa. She wants to go see her son. She didn't get to see him since I've been gone. And long story short, she just wrote me she's on her way. So I'll probably have a little bit of a break. But, you'll understand. This is just the life of human beings. I should get them dressed though. All right, so anyway, the relationship between ideals and institutions is a similar one. That circumstances change is a truism. So for all that, it is significant, for it means that if ideals must be pursued throughout the changing scenes of life, it may be necessary to modify or replace institutions in order that the same ideals should effectively be served. There are no particular institutions which, irrespective of local circumstances, are uniquely tied to their ideals. Institutions should be shot through and through with pragmatism. Okay, I just read that. So yeah, basically he's saying that institutions, like there's no such thing as a fixed institution. You should have things that are constantly transformed and constantly serving the ideals of the community, right? If your ideal is egalitarianism, like cryptocurrency comes up, you should change the laws to manage that into the paradigm, if it's supposed to be managed into the paradigm. YouTube shows up, you have to constantly be changing. It is in this same way that principles are related to rules, even when they are ethical. The idea that ethical rules can change and indeed need to change is one which a little reflection can confirm. Evidently, even when two societies share the same ethical principles, they may differ in the rules which make the principles effective. Asses were of such overwhelming importance in Israel that God found it necessary to regulate human relations by an ethical rule mentioning them specifically. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's ass. Okay, that what it means? Shit. I was like, can't be looking at my neighbor's, body. I thought that's what it meant. No, I'm joking. I don't know. But he said, if God deigned to give us similar rules today, he would no doubt forbid us to covet our neighbor's motor car, hardly his ass. Here, God would be giving a new ethical rule designed as giving effect to an unchanging ethical principle, but taking full account of modern times. So basically saying that, instead of still saying, hey, worry about this guy's donkey, right? Don't be looking at the other person's donkey, right? He's saying that you might be like, hey, don't be looking at the other person's car, As to say that it's not ethical to look at the person's car, cover the other person's car and be like, well, I ain't hear no deity say otherwise, right? that kind of thing. And actually, I did have this idea of showing you guys my music video, so maybe I'll just do that while I'm preparing my son. Let me, dang, see, I'm just like, I hate this because, this is, all right. Progress in man's conquest and harnessing of the forces of nature has a profound effect on the content of ethical rules. Progress in man's conquest and harnessing of, actually, let me just give me 2 seconds. I'm going to write this lady, because I was supposed to show her some stuff, but, because I just came back from Africa, but I don't have time for that. Hold on a second. Let me just write this. Alright, so I just want to let this person know that I don't want to be distracted too long. So progress in man's conquest and harnessing of the forces of nature has a profound effect on the content of ethical rules. Let's see. Progress in man's conquest and harnessing of the forces of nature has a profound effect on the content of ethical rules. Some ethical rules fall into abeyance because the situations in which they take effect lose all likelihood of recurrence. Others give way to their opposite, as, for example, when a matriarchal society changes into a patriarchal one. Sorry, I'm just getting a little distracted because, you tell the person, hey, I'm busy, and they're like, oh, you're busy? Let me keep writing you, Alright, so some ethical rules fall into abeyance because the situation in which they take effect lose all likelihood of recurrence. Others give way to their opposite, as, for example, when a matriarchal society changes into a patriarchal one. For here, many ethical rules arising from the position of the woman will have to give way to those arising from the new position of the man, and yet the principles standing behind the diverse clusters of ethical rules may remain constant and identical as between society and society. So he's basically saying that, ethics changes based off of the changes in the community as well. And one of the changes in the community, of course, is how people use nature. Now, I would just say economics is the key here, but there's another way to look at it, right? According to the philosophical conscientism, ethical rules are not permanent, but depending on the stage reached in the historical evolution of society. So, however, the cardinal principles of egalitarianism are conserved. A society does not change its ethics by merely changing its rules. To alter its ethics, its principles must be different. Thus, if a capitalist society can become a social society, then a capitalist society will have changed its ethics. Any change of ethics constitutes a revolutionary change. Nevertheless, many times moral rules have changed so startlingly as to give the impression of a revolution in ethics. Nevertheless, many times moral rules have changed so startlingly. Nevertheless, many times moral rules have changed so startlingly as to give the impression of a revolution in ethics. So he's like, sometimes moral rules change so startlingly, so drastically that you might think that there was a revolution in ethics, right? For example, one can take the profound change in our attitude to offenders for which modern psychology is responsible. Modern psychology brings to our notice relevant facts of what existence we have no inkling in our dreams, of whose existence we have no inkling in our dreams. Brings to our notice relevant facts of whose existence we have. Alright, hold on a second. So I'm going to go prepare my son. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys, like I told you guys before, and I was just joking that time, but I'm going to give you guys a commercial, right? So we're going to open up, this video, and then I'm going to do that. Hold on a second. I don't know if you heard the doorbell, but what is the name of this video? Oh yeah, change the videos. Oh dang, it's actually shorter than I thought.
Okay, so I know books, alright? So let me tell you about a book. Alright, check it. So the goal and objective is to be selective, electing for knowledge with the black directive, checking sources, heritage, and legacies. with the brilliance to defeat our nemesis. The book of power, so aptly named, esteemed and famed for informing the brain and doing the same as the ancestors before us. Saying Kofa, that's the life chorus. Wisdom is the key against dangers. Either change the leaders or lead the changes. We are due in Africa with no strangers. Do you hear us? Okay, hold on. We can't continue to beat the second fiddle. African power is the end of this riddle. Let's build a nation the likes which never existed. The motto heretofore, we persisted. Better, we resisted. Best, we building. We'll raise the roof and break through the ceiling. Peeling away the change we were given to stop just surviving, start thriving and living. Africa's about to host superpowers. China and US back up the time's hours. No one can be free without freeing themselves. But freedom is shown and owned on bookshelves. The book of power, a key for liberation. There's no domination where there's education, because ignorance is man's main weakness. All are exploited if we don't teach this. Then the pages of sages, king and queen, Akampong, Delaney, Dessalines, Nyere, Garvey, and Zinga, and Cooks. 500 pages surpassing most books. The task is told to bring up a continent. You will hold the tone for the confident. Have some pride and push forward your chest. Your leaders by reading one of the best. The book has science, covers violence, self-reliance, and does away with silence. The time has come for the work to get done and build up a land that is second to none. We'll organize, technologize, strategize a new Africa before our eyes, and blackness will be the complexion we see anytime we envision what it means to be free. So come join minds, read what is written. Here be solutions, no longer hidden. Nothing works in theory, all that works, works and works. So it's time to put ourselves first. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Book of Power. So the Book of Power can be purchased on Amazon. Just click on the link below. Alright, send me on tap. Tulende ma'at, tushinde is fek. Tulende ma'at, tushinde is fek. Tulende ma'at, tushinde is fek. Hotep. Yo. Alright. Check it out. Okay. Alright. Woo, that was actually pretty quick. Alright. I had to put the kids' coat on and all that crap. But, you know, you got good music while you're doing it. Nevertheless, many times moral rules have changed so startlingly as to give impression of a revolution in ethics. For example, one can take the profound changes in our attitude to offenders for which modern psychology is responsible. So this is actually pretty, well, I'll just see what he's talking about. Modern psychology brings to our notice relevant facts of whose existence we have no inkling in our dreams. When these new facts change our attitude, moral rules have not necessarily changed. The application of them is withheld, for the new consideration provoke a reclassification of the act involved and possibly bring it under a different ethical rule. In that case, a different moral attitude could become relevant. So I guess I'll give an example of this. Maybe he's going to go explore it. So let's see. Investigations into the psychology of delinquency are a case in point. Okay, good. He's going to give an example. Such investigations tend by their result to attenuate the acrimony of our moral attitude to delinquents by compelling us not admittedly to waive moral rules, but to reclassify delinquent acts. Is he going to go further into it? No. So example. So I'll just use this example, right? Hopefully the mic's on. I'll use this example, and what that is that, like, essentially a kid is missing school, right? And then you find out, oh, they're missing school because they've been, they're missing school because they moved, 5 miles farther away or something, or their bike was stolen or something like that. Like whereas you might be like, hey, why are you missing school? You'll certainly say, oh, well, your bike was stolen, and you're like raising money to, like you're just farther, you're just walking, it's no longer as immoral for you to skip school or whatever, if it's immoral to skip school. Anyway, so the cardinal ethical principle of philosophical conscientism is to treat each man as an end in himself and not merely as a means. The cardinal ethical principle of philosophical conscientism is to treat each man as an end in himself and not merely as a means. This is fundamental to all socialist or humanist conceptions of man. It is true that Immanuel Kant also identified this as a cardinal principle of ethics, but whereas he regarded it as an immediate command of reason, we derive it from a materialist viewpoint.
The cardinal ethical principle of philosophical conscientism is to treat each man as an end in himself and not merely as a means. Okay? Okay, so every person is an end of themselves, not just a means to an end. Okay? This is fundamental to all socialist or humanistic conceptions of man. It is true that Immanuel Kant also defined this cardinal principle of ethics, but whereas he regarded it as an immediate command of reason, we derive it from a materialist viewpoint. So it's like, whereas Kant may say this is a cardinal principle of ethics that he derives from reason, right? He regarded it as something that is reasonable. Kwame Nkrumah is saying that it is materialist, not necessarily as reasonable. This follows from the fact that we're all the same thing. This derivation can be made by way of the egalitarianism, which we have seen in the social reflection of materialism. Egalitarianism is based on the monistic thesis of materialism. Matter in one, even in its different manifestation. If matter is one, it follows that there is a route connecting any two manifestations of matter. This does not mean that between any two manifestations of matter there's a route which does not pass through any third form. The route need not be direct, for it may take one back to the primary forms of matter. Dialectical processes are not unilinear. They do not follow just one line, but are ramified. There is a route from any twig of a tree to any other twig, such that the route never leaves the tree. But this does not mean that the twigs all have some one point in common, for it may be necessary to pass through the trunk and join another branch in order to pass from one twig to another. Nevertheless, there is this route. These different manifestations of matter are all results of dialectical processes unfolding according to objective laws. This is a determinate process through which every manifestation is derived. So again, he's saying that even though two pieces of matter are two different manifestations of matter, they're connected by a route to each other. Not necessarily a direct connection. There could be something intermediate in between. And then he gives an example of twigs and how they don't necessarily have to connect to each other. They could be from different branches, but they still connect, i.e. through the tree, right? Anyway, so in saying, however, that there is a route between any two forms of matter, I do not attach the implication that any one form of matter can in fact be derived from any other form, for this may involve the reversal of a process which is irreversible. The upshot of which, I mean, is the continuity of nature. So the dialectical evolution of matter may lead to cul-de-sacs like the vanished plants and animals of prehistoric days. Dialectical evolution contains no hiatuses. So he's saying that, again, it doesn't mean that, just because, you get it, but basically this idea is that, a man can't become a rock, or a man can't become a plant. Although man and plant may have had similar origins at one point in human history, or at one point of living history, right? They might have had similar points, but at some point evolution is going one way, and it's not necessarily reversible per se, right? When people talk about things that are reversible, it reminds me of this thing called entropy. So entropy is one of those ideas that essentially entropy always increases, and just doesn't ever decrease or something like that. But that's also another one of those physics things that realistically speaking, it's more other physics students were more interested in that kind of question than I was, so I just didn't really care to think. Hold on a second. Let me check my mic is working. Yeah, it is. Okay. Give me 2 seconds. Let me just make sure my doors are locked, okay?
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Greetings, everyone. This is Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, inviting you to tune in to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the revolutionary matron on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Pro-Black Perspective on KWAZ Radio.
All right, so so that's it's a pretty interesting idea. All right, so let's see. It is the basic unit of matter, despite its varying manifestations, which gives rise to egalitarianism, because basically man is one, for all men have the same basis and arise from the same evolution, according to materialism. This is the objective ground of egalitarianism. David Hume, now here's the thing though, I wouldn't necessarily say that this necessitates egalitarianism in the sense that this doesn't necessitate an equality of matter. Like it doesn't necessitate that. It just says that everything was matter, you know? Either way. And not just that, it doesn't necessitate a human egalitarianism in the sense that, you know, if everything is matter, why are you not equal with the plants too? Why are you not equal with the lions? Why are you not equal with the zebras? You know, why is it that man eats cows? You know, if this, like, why does egalitarianism stop at humans? Is the question. I don't know if he's going to raise that point, but I think that's one of the things. Like I said, I have one of those. That's one of my objections. Now, of course, I don't necessarily not eat, you know, cows or anything. And of course, you know, like even if you were to talk about cows, you know, eating any life would be against the egalitarian philosophy. So even vegans would be eating a form of life. You know, technically the vegans I know, some vegans assert that they just don't eat death, i.e. they don't eat dead meat, but they might eat a living plant. But I mean, it doesn't really make it better to eat something that's living, right? I mean, like a certain to them, you know, gives them more life. Like they're eating life, so they have life, right? So they don't cook their plants either, which is like they don't boil, you know, like they don't cook. They eat everything raw, which is interesting. You know, as opposed to, yeah. So, but of course, you know, like even that idea isn't, you know, foolproof in the sense that, you know, when you get a plant, you technically, like it's technically dying. Just just the same as if you were to eat a raw animal, like a lion would, you know, it's eating an animal that's dying, if not dead, you know? You don't pick a plant off, like unless you're like eating a plant straight off of the ground like a cow would, you know, you're probably eating something that's either dead or dying. But that's, you know, neither here nor there. It depends on what you consider dead, you know? Like when you consider something dead. Do you consider it dead when it's cut off from sustaining life? Or do you consider it dead when it's decayed? But in that case, you know, when is anything dead in that sense? You know? Like, are you eating, like if you cook it, is it decaying or is it, you know? So it's an interesting conundrum. But I mean, but the reason why I brought it up is to say that egalitarianism, like why is egalitarianism only applying to humans, is not really clear if you're going by a materialist standpoint. And I'm not to say that he'd said, oh yeah, it only applies to humans, but you know, for the most part, that's what most people mean. So we'll just have to see. David Hume raised the question that ethical philosophies begin with statements of fact and suddenly seek to be statements of appraisal thereon without explaining the legitimacy of their inference. If man is basically one, then if action is objectively attentive to this fact, it must be guided by principles. The guiding principle can be stated with such generality that they become autonomous. That is to say, first, that if action is to conform to the objectivity of human unity, then it must be guided by general principles. Sorry, I just got distracted. That is to say that if, so this is David Hume, like I said, like sometimes you just skip over these white boys because they don't know what they're talking about. Like, they just don't know what they're talking about. It's going to hurt you in trying to understand, like trying to replicate what they're saying because, you know, like I just said about the egalitarianism thing, that's actually a pretty good objection, all things considered, you know? You know, biases notwithstanding. Let's see. The guiding principles can be stated with such generality that they become autonomous. That is to say, first, that if action is to conform to the objectivity of human unity, then it must be guided by general principles, which always keeps their objectivity in view. Principles which would prevent action from proceeding as if men were basically different. The guiding principle can be stated with such generality that they become autonomous. That is to say, first, that if action is to conform to the objectivity of human unity. Yeah, I'm just a little distracted from this thing, but let's go back. Let's just, like I said, I'm just going to be thorough with you guys. David Hume raised the question that ethical philosophies begin with statements of fact and suddenly seeks to base statements of appraisal thereon without explaining the legitimacy of their inference. So, it's like ethical statements don't have to be inferred or whatever. If man is basically one, then if action, and I just said that, don't quote me on that. If man is basically one, then if action is objectively attentive to this fact, it must be guided by principles. The guiding principles can be stated with such generality that they become autonomous. That is to say, first, that if action is to conform to the objectivity of human unity, then it must be guided by general principles which always keep this objectivity in view, principles which would prevent action from proceeding as if men were basically different. Secondly, these principles, because they relate to fact, can be stated boldly as though they were autonomous, like the principle that an individual should not be treated by another merely as a means but always as an end. So he's saying that there are autonomous rules, autonomous principles that, you don't actually have to rationalize or anything, but there are autonomous principles that are just there. Just this is the basis for action. This is the basis for ethics among our people, right? So if ethical principles are founded on egalitarianism, they must be objective. If ethical principles arise from an egalitarian idea of the nature of man, they must be generalizable, for according to such an idea, man is basically one in the sense defined. It is to this non-differential generalization that expression is given in the command to treat each man as an end in himself and not merely as a means. That basically, treating people as a means that you're using them, whereas as an end, it means that you're fulfilling them or something along those lines, right? That's just me speaking quickly, so don't quote me on that, right? Because some people are going to active listening and they'll be like, hey, I don't think it says that. And it's like, I do not personally care what this says, because these are white boys that died and don't really mean anything, don't really say anything. None of this stuff makes sense, realistically speaking. Egalitarianism isn't really my philosophy. So I'm not really going to defend it. I'm just trying to explain it to you or somebody, or not necessarily you. If you grasp it well, then that's fine. There are people who do not grasp it well, and so this is more so for them, right? This is more so to get through the material and explain conscientism in a way that Eli 5. Explain it like I'm 5. It's not necessarily to. I'm not necessarily teaching conscientism. That is philosophical conscientism, though it has the same cardinal principles of ethics as Kant, differs from Kant in founding ethics on a philosophical idea of the nature of man. This is what Kant describes as ethics based on anthropology. By anthropology, Kant means any study of nature of man, and he forbids ethics to be based on such a study. So Kant is saying ethics is based off of reason, and Nkrumah is saying ethics is based off of anthropology. Right? So anyway, so this precisely is this that philosophical conscientism does. It also agrees with the traditional African outlook on, and so now we're back to Africa, which is great. All right, so on the traditional African outlook on many points, and this fulfills one of the conditions which it sets for itself. In particular, it agrees with the traditional African idea of the absolute and independent existence of matter, the idea of its power of self-motion in the sense explained, the idea of categorical convertibility, and the idea of the grounding of cardinal principles of ethics in the nature of man, right? So, it's actually pretty interesting. He's saying that in traditional Africa, this philosophical conscientism, like these ideas that you thought were kind of Wazungu ideas that he was bringing up out of this materialist perspective, the materialist paradigm, he's like, actually, these are traditional African ideas. Now, I do want to point out that it is, it's usually something I would discourage of trying to, of explaining Wazungu in terms of Africa, just Africanizing Wazungu's information. I tend to discourage that, but when he just did this just now, it was pretty brilliant, pretty good. I wish he started off like that, but I think that's one of the issues, like I said, about us being Africans and how we deal with the world, where it's like we can't just like a lot of times we don't have that sort of self-confidence. I don't want to speak on the man's self-confidence because obviously he had to be confident to become president of Ghana, but I mean by that is to say that instead of essentially you have to give some sort of backdrop in order if you are to be appreciated by the people who, by the critics, by the academicians. You can't just start off, if you're talking about philosophy and you don't talk about Kant and you don't talk about Hume, and you don't talk about, so on and so forth, and you just go straight into Africa, right? Well, that's like the way I would do it, okay? But if you're trying to impress even a European audience, right, then that's not what you would do, Like if you do it that way, then, well, I mean, that's not what you do, but it really speaks to the wider power at play, because again, white people do not start off, the Igbo, they don't do that, but we say, oh yeah, well the Germans, it's a little depressing, but you understand, again, these are, like, you're dealing with human beings. You're not dealing with ideas. You're dealing with an African who exists in the context where, if he wants to be appreciated as a philosopher, like, those are the things that you have to do, Like I said, like there's just the reality. There's the reality of the world, and people will tell me, in fact, they'll be like, hey, I've had people tell me, hey, you'd be more popular if you didn't call white people crackers. You know what I'm saying? Like, you say you hate white folk. You know what I mean? Like, people don't want to hear that. If you didn't bash the Bible, people, like, there's certain things that you have to just do, And if you can either choose to do them, and, like, you get to choose to do them and be more popular, or you choose not to do them and be less popular. There's a calculus in everything. And so, if you're writing a philosophical text that you want to be accepted into the philosophical world, right, then you quote and cite your philosophical predecessors, right? Even if they are, but even if you're just trying to explain your own traditional views. However, but like the thing is that I should have, I would have loved to have told Kwame Nkrumah is that, bro, you had the power to put your ideas into practice. You had that power already. You didn't need to appeal. You didn't need to slip through. You didn't need to sneak in. You had the power. Kwame Nkrumah was more important than Kant or Hume, for the lives of the Ghanaian, and I think that would have been. I mean, of course, there's the reasoning. Well, do I just want to impact Ghana? Like, should I also impact Senegal? Should I also impact Sierra Leone? So on and so forth. And in that sense, I could see, being more thorough in the Wazungu sense. But again, everything is a calculus. I think, like, it's unfortunate. I think it's unfortunate. Or I mean, I could see him doing. I think he should have done this and something else though. Maybe he did do something else, but ultimately, obviously, this thing doesn't come into fruition, and this is all just a nice book, but it would have been something. Anyway, so let's keep going. In particular, it agrees with the traditional. Yeah, so the traditional African standpoint, of course, accepts the absolute independent idea of matter. If one takes the philosophy of Africans, one finds that it is in the absolute and independent existence of matter is accepted. No, you find that in the absolute independent existence of matter is accepted. Further, matter is not just dead weight, but alive with forces and tensions. Indeed, for the African, everything that exists as a complex of forces and tensions. In holding force and tension to be essential to whatever exists, he is, like Thales and like philosophical conscientious, endowing matter with an original power of self-motion. They were endowing it with what matter would need to initiate qualitative and substantial changes. Now, I like this so far. Let me just see how many pages this is. Yeah, because I thought it was going to be, 106. But look, by the way, look at how deadly this thing looks. Look at this. This is 110. This is going to be a reader. I'm going to do this one live. Okay, chapter 5 is going to be live. Oh, no, I'm not going to do it live. I'm going to do it like a recording, but it's going to be that. So I think this is where I'm stopped. Yeah. All right. So let me just double check. Yeah. All right, so when a plurality of men exists in society and it is accepted that each man needs to be treated as an end in himself, not merely as a means, there transpires a transition from ethics to politics. Politics becomes actual, for institutions need to be created to regulate the behavior and actions of the plurality of men in society in such a way as to conserve the fundamental ethical principle of the initial worthiness of each individual. Philosophical conscientism consequently adumbrates a political theory and a social political practice which together seeks to ensure that the cardinal principles of ethics are effective. Now, here's the thing. I'll admit, he says transition from ethics to politics. Ethics comes first, and then politics comes afterwards, right? I tend to reason that ethics is as the offshoot of a culture, right? That actually economics comes before politics, and then so on and so forth. So this will always be like everybody has their own idea. Okay, I will try to articulate my own idea in my own book, but obviously, this is not my book. This is Kwame Nkrumah's book. So I just want you to know that there's also that when you're when you're reading something, you're actively reading something. Weigh it against your own ideas, right? Or weigh it against the ideas of your favorite author, right? But either way, just weigh things that you read, and because everything is pretty legitimate. So the socio-political practice is directed at preventing the emergence of the solidifying of classes. For in the Marxist conception of class culture, there is an exploitation and a subjection of class to class. Exploitation and class subjection are alike contrary to Consciencism. So he's like, exploitation and class subjection are contrary to Consciencism because, materialism is egalitarian. By reason of its egalitarian tenet, philosophical Consciencism seeks to promote individual development, but in such a way that the conditions for the development of all become the conditions for the development of each. That is, in such a way that the individual development does not introduce such diversities as to destroy the egalitarian basis. The social political practice also seeks to coordinate social forces in such a way as to mobilize them logically for the maximum development of society along true egalitarian lines. For this, planned development is essential. So he's pointing out, so basically he's saying, look, philosophical conscientism is not going to have class exploitation. Right? If we're philosophically conscientious, if we're saying, hey, humans need to be developed, then they will be developed only, however, in so much as they maintain an egalitarian basis. And in order for that to be, he's like, you also have to have planned development. I call them planned economy, or anybody else will call them planned economy, but he says planned development, and it's just the same thing, right? In the political aspect, philosophical conscientism is faced with the realities of colonialism, imperialism, disunity, and lack of development. Singly and collectively, these four militate against the realization of the social justice based on true ideas of equality, right? So he's saying that these ideas, colonialism and yada yada, are against true ideas of equality. So the first step is to liquidate colonialism wherever it is. And towards colonial freedom, I stated that it is the aim of colonial governments to treat their colonies as producers of raw material and at the same time as a dumping ground of the manufactured goods of foreign industrialists and foreign capitalists. I have always believed that the basis of colonialism is economic, but the solution of the colonial problem lies in political action, in a fierce and constant struggle for the emancipation as an indispensable first step towards securing economic independence and integrity. So, again, he's like, we have to have political action. Like, basically, the conscientism is a political action against colonialism. Colonialism has this thing where they're taking away the raw materials, right? They're taking away the raw materials of Africa, and they're dumping their manufactured goods onto Africa. Now, again, this kind of does paint it much more negatively in the sense that, like realistically speaking, if you look at Africa, people want these manufactured goods. It's not just a dumping ground. And some of the goods you might say, well, no, we don't like those shirts. We don't like the hand-me-down clothes. We don't like the used clothes, right? And sure you don't, but the reality is this. You got to go back to the reality. Reality is this. You want the car, right? Okay. Now, here's how it goes, right? You want a car from me, okay? Yeah, you want a car from me, all right? Like let's say you go to the car dealer. You say, hey, let me get a car. And then you tell them, but I have no money, right? Then it becomes, okay. Like, if you're going to walk away with a car, you have to give him something, And, don't think of it that way, but think of it like, well, he's like, hey, would you give me some coltan, I guess? Like, you don't have any money, but I guess you have coltan. You have fruits, I guess, like you have pineapples. Let me see this. Would you take some of my would you take some of my used shirts with you as well as the car? And you're like, yeah, sure. I'll take the car and your used shirts and I'll give you pineapples and coltan or something. And he's like, okay, deal. Like to say that, you're dealing with a trade, but you're trading with somebody who has something that you want, and like you basically, like what they want from you would be your raw materials, or for you to take their stuff that they don't, like their trash, their nuclear waste or something, and you might be like, well, that's unfair, But it's like, what do you think is like, if I go to the dealer and I say I don't have any money, then like I won't actually have a car. You know what I mean? Like I just won't walk away with a car. But again, that's in the same economy where you actually have money. But if like, how do you get money when there's no money? Like you don't have money. You know what I'm saying? Because remember, like Ghanaian, like let's say you go to Ghana, Ghana does not have money. Like it doesn't have any American currency unless America trades it with them. Unless somebody trades American currency with them, they don't have any American currency. You know? So now if America wants American currency for their cars or Ghanaian CDs for their cars, like that's where the trade thing comes in. And this is like one of like this, because you can't just be like, oh well, you know, I just printed up some money, so now I can get everything I could buy your whole country. It's like, no, you know, like no, that's not how it works, you know. That's not how it works, and a lot of us don't understand that. So I hope you appreciated that explanation. But a lot of us don't understand that, and because we don't understand that, we're running into these big problems. But basically, you have to, as yourself, become a manufacturing power. Instead of just looking at like colonialism. So like colonialism was terrible, obviously, but instead of just looking at it like strictly from that viewpoint, you know, you can look at it from a perspective of, well, yeah, what about we start manufacturing more stuff though? You know, like let's manufacture things to the point where we can do that. Because if Germany wanted, you know, a car, it'd be like, it's like, yeah, okay, sure. You know, like I want one of your cars too. You know what I mean? And I said earlier, like not me personally. I'm saying that like America would engage Germany and be like, oh, you're gonna give it, you want some of our cars? Shit, we want some of your cars. You know what I'm saying? But then you come to Africa and you're like, and Africa's like, hey, we like some of your cars, and it's like, okay, what do you have? You know, and that's where manufacturing goods comes in. Like, and that's how currencies are disbalanced, you know, are unbalanced because of that. I said earlier on the Consciencism regards matter as a plenum or force intention. That's actually a good ass description. I'm not going to hold you. I'm going to write that down in my notes. Let me see. Cars Between Nations, dumps. Let me see. This is chapter 4, 2 hours and 25 minutes. Chapter 4. 22500. Just gotta make notes, you know. I want to write like when you're writing a book for people, you just want to write the best book. That's what I'm trying to do. I really want to write a book with some good information. So please try to encourage me. If you didn't already write a comment about when you listen to this, I already forgot what the topic was, but like, come on, like let's encourage each other. I said earlier on that Consciencism regard matter as a plenum of forces in tension, right? Matter as a plenum of forces and tensions, but he's saying that matter has forces inside of it, self-motion, that kind of stuff. And that is his dialect. And I don't know what plenum means. I'm just saying that's the, like, you could look it up if you want to. It's not that important. The important point is to follow your context clues and just, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I said earlier on the Consciencism regards matter as a plenum of forces in tension. And that is the dialectical aspect. It holds categorical conversion to be possible by a critical disposition of matter. This gives us a clue to analyze the fact of colonialism, not only in Africa, but indeed everywhere. It also gives us a clue how to defeat it. In a colonial situation, there are forces which tend to promote colonialism, to promote those political ties by means of which a colonialist country binds its colonies to itself with the primary object of furthering her economic advantage. Colonialism requires exertion, and much of that exertion is taken up by the combat of progressive forces which seek to negate his oppressive enterprise of greed, this aggressive enterprise of greedy individuals and classes by means of which an egotistical imposition of the strong is made upon the weak. Just as the placid appearance of matter only disguises the tension of forces underlying the appearance, like the bow of Heraclitus, so in a colonial territory, an opposition of reactionary and revolutionary forces can nevertheless give an impression of final and acquiescent, I don't know that word, subjugation. But just as a quality can be changed by quantitative, measurable changes of critical nature and matter, so this acquiescent impression can be obliterated by a change in the relation of the social forces. These opposing set of forces are dynamic in the sense that they seek intent to establish some social condition. One may therefore refer to them by the name of action in order to make their dynamic nature explicit. In In that case, one may say that in a colonial situation, positive action and negative action can be discerned. Positive action will represent the sum of those forces seeking social justice in terms of the destruction of oligarchic exploitation and oppression. Negative action will correspondingly represent the sum of those forces tending to prolong colonial subjugation and exploitation. Positive action is revolutionary and negative action is reactionary. So basically he's saying that there are two types of actions within any sort of, within the colony, in a sense. And the positive action is the one that's trying to destroy the colony, and the negative action is those that's trying to destroy the people who are destroying the colony, right? Of course, it's to prolong the subjugation and exploitation, right? So one is reactionary, one's revolutionary. It ought to be recognized at the outset that the introduced terms of positive and negative action are abstractions, but the ground for them is a social reality. It is quite possible, by means of statistical analysis, to discover the ways in which positive action and negative action are related in any given society. The statistical analysis will be of such facts as production, distribution, income, etc. Any such analysis must reveal one of three possible situations. Positive action may exceed negative action, or negative action may exceed positive action, or they may form an unstable equilibrium. In a colonial situation, negative action undoubtedly outweighs positive action. In order that true independence should be won, it is necessary that positive action should come to overwhelm negative action, like revolution should overwhelm reaction, right? Admittedly, a semblance of true independence is possible without this specific relation. When this happens, we say that neocolonialism set in. For neocolonialism is guise adopted by negative action in order to give the impression that it has been overcome by positive action. Neocolonialism is negative action playing possum. So he's basically saying that there's also the case where the reactionaries appear to be the revolutionaries. You get what I'm saying? The reactionaries appear to be the revolutionaries, and because of that, you have neocolonialism. And so he's describing, but you know, I think that's an interesting way to look at it. Obviously, I would look at neocolonialism, like I use the word Ascari, but again, like don't even worry about that. You could read the Book of Power if you so choose, and you'll see like a different description of neocolonialism. But this is a good description nonetheless. In order to forestall this, I mean, it's always good to just expose yourself to more information, you know, and more perspectives, and then create or adapt your own, you know, and then of course, like I say, build institutions to proliferate your own or to share in other people's institutions, you know. In order to forestall this, it is necessary for positive action to be backed by a mass party, and qualitatively to improve this mass so that by education and an increase in its degree of consciousness, its aptitude for positive action becomes heightened. We can therefore say that that in a colonial territory, positive action must be backed by a mass party, complete with its instruments of education. This is why the Convention People's Party of Ghana developed from an early stage as education wing, workers wing, farmers wing, youth wing, women's wing, etc. In this way, the people received constant political education, their self-awareness was increased, and such a self-image was formed as ruthlessly excluded colonialism in all its guises. It is also in the backing of millions of members and supporters, united by common radical purpose, that the revolutionary character of the Convention's People's Party consists, and not merely in the piquancy of its programs. Its mass and national support made it possible to think in realistic terms of instituting change of a fundamental nature in the social hodgepodge bequeathed by colonialism. So again, you know, the thing that people like about Marxism, Leninism, is this idea that they do these political parties that have this education of the masses, and the masses themselves will bring about the revolutionary change of society or the replacement of the other society. So the masses will become the positive action that will overcome the negative action, or overtake the negative action. A people's parliamentary democracy with a one-party system is better able to express and satisfy the common aspirations of a nation as a whole than a multi-party parliamentary system, which is in fact only a ruse for perpetuating and cover-ups the inherent struggles between the haves and the have-nots. So, all right, so this is another thing that you might, so here's the thing that you might, a lot of people, like liberals in a sense, or moderates in a sense, they might be like, I disagree with this. You know, he's talking about one-party rules is better than multi-party rule, right? And because one party, and there's reasoning for this, right? Multiple party means that the have-nots will have a party. The haves will have a party, right? And if the haves have a party, then the haves have a say. The oligarchy, the anti-egalitarians have a say, and if the say is large enough, then the anti-egalitarians are going to win policy and affect policy, when in fact you want only the egalitarians to have a say, and if the egalitarians alone have a say, then it's not a multi-party, it's a one-party, right? All right, now, obviously, one could obviously say, well, what about a multi-party that's only consists of one of egalitarians? But that's the non-realism there. The idea is that you would not have a multi-party that only consisted of one parties. Of egalitarians. You would have a multi-party that had the oligarchists as well. And if the oligarchists have party and if the oligarchists have influence, then you might as well have an oligarchy. Like eventually you'll have an oligarchy. And so, you obviously America's not, like you probably would say that America is a multi-party system, or actually, Kwame Nkrumah was famous for saying that America is a one-party system as well. But in usual American extravagance, they just have two, right? But they just have two, single-party, whatever. But like technically the way how the American government is trying to portray itself is that the Democrats are the more egalitarian and the Republicans are the more oligarchic, or how have you. And what happens is that in American politics, as they are constantly complaining, they are saying that, oh no, the centrist Democrats are always not, basically, long story short, it's just a ruse. And that's what Kwame Nkrumah was pointing out. But he was pointing it out in 1964, and it's just the same thing, right? So it's pretty strong. All right. In order that a territory should acquire the nominal attributes of independence, it is of course not necessary that positive action should exceed negative action. When a colonialist country sees the advance of positive action, it unfailingly develops a policy of containment, a policy whereby it seeks to check this advance and limit it. This policy often takes the form of conferences and protracted constitutional reforms. Containment is, however, accepted by the colonialist country only as a second best. What it would really like to do is to roll back positive action. It is when it is assured of the impossibility of rolling back the billows of history that it applies the policy of containment, that it tries to limit the achievement of progress by devising frivolous reforms. The colonialist country seeks to divert positive action into channels which are harmless to it. Now again, this is why you do mass action. The reason why you do mass action is this, right? And not to say that I have like a more elitist philosophy. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna hold you. But this is like more populist philosophy. The populist philosophy, the reason why it works better, or not works better, but the reason, like, here's the merit to it, right? The merit is this, right? If you're going by the elite philosophy, or if you go by, hey, we got 100 people who are really good, right? Or we got 1,000 people who are really good, or whatever, right? The reality is that if you could just relegate them, it gives you a bunch of easy targets. It gives you a bunch of easy targets. You cut the head of the snake and the snake dies, right? If, however, it's the masses, if it's a massive number of the workers, the millions, right? You can't necessarily kill the millions. You could, but then, like, the entire economy is going to collapse, And so that's partly why you would do, that's one of the merits towards mass action. So just another consideration for you, even when you're reading me and you're like, hey, Oni, I think you had the right philosophy and all that. I'm even telling you, hey, look, just follow what you, not say follow what you have, but devise your thoughts and really weigh out the pros and cons of everything, because everything has a pros and cons, Anyway, so the colonist country seeks to divert positive actions into channels which are harmless to it. But again, containment is just like, oh, okay, we're going to keep you limited. We're going to do a bunch of reforms and all that kind of stuff. So they're very positive action channels which are harmless to it, so on and so forth, right? Like, oh, okay, we'll have this meeting, we'll have this commission, we'll entertain your issue, and 10 years down the line, nothing happens, right? To this, it resorts to diverse, subtle means. Having abandoned direct violence, the colonialist country imparts a deceptive orientation to the negative force in its subject territory. These negative forces become the political wolf masquerading in sheep's clothing. They join the clamor for independence and are accepted in good faith by the people. It is then that, like a wasting disease, they seek from the inside to infest, corrupt, pervert, and thwart the aspirations of the people. The people, the body, and the souls of the nation, the final sanction of political decision, and the inheritors of sovereignty cannot be fooled for long. Quick on the scent, they ferret out these Janus-faced politicians who run with the hare and hunt with the hounds. He used that like 3 times now. They turn away from them. Once this colonial subterfuge is exposed and the minion accomplice is discredited, the colonial power has no option but to acknowledge the independence of the people. By this very next act, however, it seeks without grace to neutralize the same independence by fomenting discontent and disunity, and finally by arrant ingratiation and wheedling it, attempts to disinherit the people and constitute itself their conscience and their will, if not their voice and their arm. Political decisions, just as they were before independence was won, lose their reference to the welfare of the people and serve once again the well-being and security of the erstwhile colonial power and the clique of self-centered politicians. So basically he's pointing out how neocolonialism comes about. Any oblique attempt of a foreign power to thwart, balk, corrupt, or otherwise pervert true independence of a sovereign people's neocolonialist, right? Is neocolonialist. It is neocolonialist because it seeks, notwithstanding the acknowledged sovereignty of a people, to subordinate their interests of those of foreign power. So he says, he's just giving a definition of neocolonialism. He says it's their interests are subordinated to the foreign power, right? A colonialist country can in fact offer independence to a people, not with the intention which such an act might be thought to imply, but in the hope that the positive and progressive forces thus appeased and quietened the people might be exploited with greater serenity and comfort. So he's like, hey, they give you independence because they say, hey, we probably exploit you when you're like, if your revolutionary spirit is, like, oh yeah, we won, right? Then you go back to work. You know what I mean? So neocolonialism is a greater danger to independent countries than is colonialism. Colonialism is crude, essentially overt, and apt to be overcome by a purposeful concert of national effort. So this is actually kind of like what Fanon was saying too. He's like, hey, neocolonialism is actually like that beast that we have to get. Colonialism is crude, essentially overt, and apt to be overcome by a purposeful concern of national effort. In neocolonialism, however, the people are divided from their leaders, and instead of providing true leadership and guidance, which is informed at every level by the ideals of the general welfare, leaders come to neglect the very people who put them in power and incautiously become instruments of suppression on behalf of the neocolonialists. So, yeah. Let me just double check how many pages this is. Okay, so we got like 5 more pages or something. Unconsciously becoming instruments, so on and so on. It is far easier for the proverbial camel to pass through the needle's eye, hump and all, than for an erstwhile colonial administration to give sound and honest counsel of a political nature to this liberated territory. To allow a foreign country, especially one which is loaded with economic interest in our continent, to tell us what political decisions to take, what political courses to follow, is indeed for us to hand back our independence to the oppressor on a silver platter. Again, he's saying, the colonialism, like everybody's economically interested in themselves, right? The colonial administrator is not going to give you political advice that doesn't benefit him, Like, he's not going to be like, nobody's going to say, hey, you know what? Like it's like there's like this idea of this white guy who's like, hey, don't trust me. Like, don't trust any white people, not even me. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah, that's like the only, like, those are the rare occasions where it's like, yeah, okay, I believe you. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, okay, I believe you. All right. But anyway, likewise, since the motivation of colonialism, whatever protean forms it may take, is well and truly economic, colonialism itself being but the institution of political bonds fastening colonies to a colonialist country with the primary object of metropolitan economic advantage, it is essential that a liberated territory should not bind her economy to that of the ousted rulers. Okay, sorry. So likewise, is the motivation of colonialism, whatever protean forms it may take, is well and truly economic. Colonialism itself being but the institution of political bonds fastening colonies on a colonialist country with the primary object of the metropolitan economic advantage, it is essential that a liberated territory should not bind her economy to that of the ousted rulers. I.e., if you were once colonized by the French, do not bind your economy with the French, Liberation should not, just leave them alone. The liberation of a people's institutes, principles which enjoin the recognition and destruction of imperialist domination, whether it is political, economic, social, or cultural. To destroy imperialistic domination in these forms, political, economic, social, and cultural action must always have reference to the needs and the nature of liberated territory. It is from these needs and nature that the action must derive authenticity. Unless this self-reference is religiously maintained, the liberated territory will welcome with open arms the very foe which it sought to destroy at cost of a terrible suffering. So he's like, unless this self-reference is religiously maintained. So unless you keep on with, okay, we're doing this for Ghana. you're going to just welcome back brain, right? So anyway, the true welfare of a people does not admit of compromise. If we compromise on the true interests of our people, the people must one day judge us, for it is with their effort and their sacrifice, with their forbearance and their denial, that independence is won. Independence, once won, is possible to rule against the erstwhile colonial power, but it is not really possible to rule against the wish and interests of the people. The people are the backbone of positive action. It is by the people's effort that colonialism is routed. It is by the sweat of the people's brow that the nations are built. These people are the reality of national greatness. It is the people who suffer the depredations and indignities of colonialism. The people must not be insulted by the dangerous flirtation with neocolonialism. Basically, you have to fight for the people. Positive action is about the people. The people are the ones who fought for us. This is the fundamental law of evolution of matter to higher forms. This evolution is dialectical. It is also the fundamental law of society. It is out of tension that being is born. Becoming is a tension, and being in the child of that tension of opposed forces and tendencies. Just as in the physical universe, since the moving object is always impressed upon by external forces, any motion is in fact a resultant. So in society, every development, every progressive motion is a resultant of unharmonious forces, a triumph of positive action over negative action. He's like, look, the physical universe, he's comparing the physical universe with the social development. Social development is, if it's a progressive motion, it's a result of revolution over reaction. Okay? The triumph must be accompanied by knowledge, for in the way that the process of natural evolution can be aided by human intervention based upon knowledge, so social evolution can be helped along by political intervention based upon knowledge of the laws of social development. Political action aimed at speeding up social evolution is a nature of catalyst. The need of such is of the nature of a catalyst, right? A catalyst is just something that helps something, right? So the need of such a catalyst is created by, and just don't take that literally, obviously. Because some people are going to be really particular. I didn't agree. You're like, okay, all right. The need for such a catalyst is created by the fact that natural evolution is always wasteful. It takes place at the cost of a massive loss of life and at the cost of extreme anguish. Evolution, speeded by scientific knowledge, is prompter and represents an economy of material. In the same way, the catalyst is which political action introduces into social evolution represents an economy of time, life, and talent. So again, he's saying, look, evolution is actually it's wasteful. Right? It's not straightforward. It costs a lot of energy. It sometimes results in the death of something, yada yada. It has false starts and false directions, so on and so forth. And if you were to aid it with intelligence, then it would be quicker, like selective breeding kind of thing, right? If you want a fast horse, you could just breed them with fast horses and stop breeding the slow horses, right? Or breed the horse with a certain musculature, so on and so forth. And just the same, he's like, hey, for social development, you can politically intervene to make something better. And this is where he's going to probably rationalize scientific socialism. Okay, so without positive action, a colonial territory cannot be truly liberated. So he's like, without the revolution, so it's not going to be liberated on its own. Without the revolutionary positive action, so on and so forth, it's not going to be liberated. So it is doomed to creep in its petty pace from day to day towards the attainment of a sham independence that turns to dust, independence which is shot through and through with the supreme interest of an alien power. To achieve true... actually, I do want to say this, because, some people who are listening might be Haitian, right? Haiti is like that right now. Haiti is, let's say has this... it just lost its president. So that's technically an independence, okay? Right? If it loses its government, it's technically independence, right? It's it's a sham independence. And it's going to turn to dust, and it's going to be this interest of alien powers is going to be what's in effect. If you do lose your president, if you do lose your government, it should be based off of revolutionary action, based off of positive action. And this is partly why, one of the things that, even me now thinking, I should be writing a book on positive action. Because you gotta say to yourself, how can you be useful to this planet? How can you be useful to the liberation of our people? How can you be useful to Haiti? How can you be useful to Sierra Leone? How can you be useful to Togo? How can you be useful? And it's yes, we want to prompt positive action into our people. Pump positive action into our people. And so, this is a friendly reminder, and I just gotta admit it. I'm gonna write it down. Positive action. Let me see what's the timestamp here. 2:47. Okay. So yeah, and I need to sit down because I've been standing forever. But yeah, All right, so without positive action, so on and so forth, it's doomed to creep at this petty pace from day to day toward the attainment of a sham independence that turns to dust, independence which is shot through and through with supreme interest of enabling power. To achieve true liberation, positive action must begin with an objective analysis of the situation which it seeks to change. Such an analysis I attempted in towards colonial freedom. Positive action must furthermore seek an alignment of all the forces of progress, and by marshalling them, confront the negative forces. It must at the same time anticipate and contain its own inner contradictions. For though positive action unites those forces of a situation which are, in regard to a specific purpose, progressive, many of these forces will contain tendencies which are, in other respects, reactionary. So it's like, yeah, sometimes you can have progressive forces that also have negativity to them. Reactionary forces to them. So hence, when positive action resorts to an alignment of forces, it creates in itself seams at which the alignment might fall apart. It is essential that positive action should, in its dialectical evolution, anticipate the seminal disintegration and discover ways of containing the future schismatic tendencies, a way of nipping fragmentation in the bud as colonialism begins to reel and totter under the frontal onslaught of positive action. But even with colonialism worsted, positive action cannot relent, for it is about this time that the schismatic tendencies refer to ripen. Besides, political independence, though worthwhile in itself, is still only a means to the fuller redemption and realization of a people. When independence has been gained, positive action requires a new orientation away from the sheer destruction of colonialism and towards national reconstruction. So, sorry, I got a little distracted. But even when colonialism worsted, I don't know what worsted is. So that's what I'm saying. This guy has a good diction. He has a really good diction because he's using words I didn't even know about. I should write down the other one. It was plenum, right? Plenum and worsted. And sometimes when you come across words that you don't know, just look them up later. Like, you'll notice that I knew quite a few words because I when I was younger, I was more curious about learning this language. I'm not to say that the thing is this, you should constantly be curious about learning this language. I'm just not looking up right now because I'm reading to you, but usually I would read it. Like if I were reading this by myself, I'd be looking up words quite a bit. But anyway, even with colonialism worsted, positive action cannot relent, right? So even if you win, right, even if you defeat colonialism, I'm gonna guess this is defeat or something, right? You have to keep on with the positive action, keep on with the revolutionary thinking. For it is about this time that the schismatic tendencies referred to ripen. So the schismatic tendencies is that you might have positive action that also has negative action in it. Like, so you have revolutionary thought, also has reactionary thought. You might have like revolutionary forces that are like, like I said, if you go to Haiti, I believe it was Toussaint. I'm not 100% sure. It could have been Dessalines, but I don't want to badmouth Dessalines, so I'm going to say it's Toussaint. Like they were like, hey, let's reinstate slavery. You know what I mean? Let's keep slavery going. Let's keep these people on the plantation. Let's keep these blacks on the plantation, notwithstanding, right? That's it. He's part of the revolutionary forces going against the enslavement of Africans by Wazungu, sure. But, you have to be positively active. The same thing happened in America, in fact, where it was like, yeah, Africans would be off the plantations, but then they have to do sharecropping, which was basically the same thing. So, besides political independence, though, worthwhile in itself, is still only a means to the fuller redemption and realization of a people. When independence has been gained, positive action requires a new orientation away from the sheer destruction of colonialism and towards national reconstruction. So you can't just be, revolutionary thought is not just, after the destruction of colonialism, now you have to be about reconstructing your community, right? So, and this is just, this should be common sense, but it's not, obviously. So it's a good thing that he's writing it. It is indeed in this address to national reconstruction that positive action faces its gravest danger. The cajolement, the wheedling, the seduction, and the Trojan horse of neocolonialism must be stoutly resisted, for neocolonialism's latter-day harpy, a monster which entices its victim with sweet music. In order to be able to carry out this resistance to neocolonialism at every point, positive action requires to be armed with an ideology which, vitalizing it and operating through a mass party, shall equip it with a regenerative concept of the world and life, forge for it a strong continuing link with our past, and offer to it an assured bond with our future. Under the searchlight of an ideology, every fact affecting the life of a people can be assessed and judged, and neocolonialism's detrimental acerations and sleight of hands will constantly stand exposed, right? So yeah, but it's again, like I said, he should have had Boko, Boko, or churches, or it's a place of worship, 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 WARSHIP, a place of worship, But really, if you know these religions, you know that they're places of worship. He should have had places of worship, because like what he's saying is really good. It's actually telling me that when I write this next book, I have to be much less abstract, obviously, but like very like make it so that anybody, like a 5-year-old, could read it. You know, make it so that a 5-year-old could read it. That like this is not something that this book right here is like a college student. I wanted so a 5-year-old could read it, so that so that even 5-year-olds could read it. Like, well, not 5-year-olds, but obviously. But you get what I'm saying. It's just a reference to this thing called Eli 5, ELI 5, which means explain it like I'm 5. But it's just like the simplest explanation. Okay. So in order that this ideology should be comprehensive, in order that it should light up every aspect of the life of our people, in order that it should affect the total interests of our society, establishing a continuity with our past, it must be socialist in form and in content and be embraced by a mass party. And yet, socialism in Africa today tends to lose its objective content in favor of distracting terminology in favor of a general confusion. Discussion centers more on the various conceivable types of socialism than upon the need for socialist development. Discussion centers more on the various conceivable types of socialism than upon the need for socialist development. So he's like, usually when you talk about socialism in Africa today, you're like, oh, there's different types of socialism. It's like, no, we have to talk about the need for it, the need for the development here. More is surely required than a mere reaction against a policy of domination. Obviously there's socialism that's just a reaction to policy, the reaction to colonialism, right? Independence is of the people. It is won by the people for the people. That independence is of the people is admitted by every enlightened theory of sovereignty. That is won by the people is to be seen in the success of mass movements everywhere. That is won for the people follows from their ownership of sovereignty. The people have not mastered their independence until it has been given a national and social content and purpose, and that will generate their well-being and uplift. The socialism of a liberated territory is subject to a number of principles if independence is not to be alienated from the people. When socialism is true to its purpose, it seeks a connection with the egalitarian and humanist past of the people before their social evolution was ravaged by colonialism. So the socialism of a liberated territory is subject to a number of principles if independence is not to be alienated from the people. Sorry, I'm just like wrapping up. And I know that I'm thinking to myself, I'm probably going to read this right after I'm finished, but I'm also wondering, should I go eat? Should I not go eat? So it's like, I'm just doing my mental math right now. Like I would just record it right now. You know what I mean? Because my son is gone, and what else am I gonna do? I could just read this book, finish the book, and then go about my life and do the other book I'm supposed to do. Let's just do Wealth of Nations, as well as Garvey's book. But do I want to read them right now? Do I want to do something? What do I want to do? I could just, whatever. It's 6:20 right now for me. 6:20 p.m. All right, so the people have not, this is November 5th. So the people have not mastered their independence until it has been given a national and social content and purpose that will generate their well-being and uplift. So, so you have to be, like, you want mass action. And, again, it's, like, really sad because you go to Ghana and you do not see this philosophy at all. This revolutionary positive action thing that's, we got to rebuild our country. And like, you don't see that at all in Ghana. Even if you're watching the news, you don't really pick up on it. I pointed out that there was somebody who was, like, on the news, like, hey, we need to make Nkrumah's memorial site look a lot better, a lot sprucier. It has nothing to do with positive action, nothing to do with revolution, per se. But, that's the attitude that's there. There's a lot of unemployment. It's a really precarious situation, and this is, like, it's a little bit sad in retrospect because, this is such a gigantic piece of work. But, it is what it is. The socialism of a liberated territory is subject to a number of principles if independence is not to be alienated from the people. When socialism is true to its purpose, it seeks a connection with the egalitarian and humanist past of the people before their social evolution was ravaged by colonialism. So, when socialism is true to its purpose, it seeks a connection with the egalitarian and humanist past of the people before their social evolution was ravaged by colonialism. It seeks from the results of colonialism those elements like new methods of industrial production and economic organization, which can be adapted to serve the interests of the people. It seeks to... Okay, so because I'm actually struggling right now to figure out where he mentions Christianity and Islam in depth, because it seems like he's not going to, which is... Like, because again, I was kind of turned off from the book because it seemed like he was going to. But because he didn't, it's kind of interesting. But this is the thing that you want to realize. This is actually pretty critical. He says, look, colonialism did bring about new methods of industrial production and economic organization. And so we want to adapt those towards what we had before, which was the egalitarian humanism, right? So that's one of the things that people don't pick up on regarding socialism as a theory, is that it really has to do with industrial production and economic organization. Now, unfortunately, like I said, Ghana pretty much is seemingly, or Accra, pretty much seemingly pre-industrial still, notwithstanding 60 years after their president was actively writing on the need for industrialization. Anyway, so the new methods of industrial production and economic organization, which can be adapted to serve the interests of the people. And by the way, I'm referencing his other book, Neocolonialism. I gave it to somebody, though, somebody in Ghana. My gift to Nkrumah, right? Anyway, so it seeks to contain and prevent the spread of those anomalies and domineering interests created by the capitalist habit of colonialism. It reclaims the psychology of the people, erasing the colonial mentality from it, and it resolutely defends the independence and security of the people. In short, socialism recognizes dialectic, the possibility of creation from forces which are opposed to one another. It recognizes the creativity of struggle and indeed the necessity of the operation of forces to any change. It also embraces materialism and translates this into a social term of equality. So I guess he does not go into talk about the thing. I'm pretty, like, it's a little sad, when you go to Ghana 60 years later, because this is the reason why I don't like socialists. Not that I don't like socialists. I don't like socialism. It's because it's too fantastical. It's too much like a fantasy, and it's just not attached to reality, not attached to realism. And so, here's this man who's probably, telling other people, hey, if you don't follow the rules, like let's build this, let's do this, let's do that, and people are probably looking at him like, dude, that's not even, it's not gonna happen, right? And he's like, no, it's not going to, it can happen, it will happen. And then it doesn't happen. And it's like, all that human drama that was around that, was unnecessary. Like, you could almost feel it palpable. Like, you could almost feel it so many years later just reading the book. Because, there's definitely going to be some frustration that this is not manifesting, but it's not going to manifest because it can't manifest, If he wanted to manifest, though, he would have probably done the Boko thing like I was talking about, the little centers. But the fact that I go to Ghana and I don't see any of these centers kind of tells you that either they were never there or that they were taken down or something. So, like it really informs us in terms of our political activity, what to do next. But I hope you enjoyed that chapter 4. I did try to be a little thorough. I hope you enjoyed it. But if you didn't enjoy it, that's fine too. I don't know why you listened this long if you didn't enjoy it, honestly. But I thank you for just being here. Like I said, subscribe, like, share, drop that comment that I asked you to drop. And other than that, appreciation, and thanks for your patience with me too. I have to send my son to his mother, and you helped me out with that. But other than that, Shemiam Hotep, Uncle John, Seneb. Oh, I know. You're saying to yourself, dang, I just gave you guys a timeline for, like whatever person is like, ooh, I know what time his son is, blah, 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 That's a terrible thing, but, it is what it is. Anyway, that's just me slipping up. So let me just shut up, right? Shemiam Hotep, Aku Jah, Seneb, Neb, Amen, Ma'at, Dua Netra.